Chapter 1863. The gatekeeping divine beasts had suddenly fallen to the ground, and none of the 4 lion flood dragons were left. They were all foaming at the mouth and twitching on the ground, and no one knew what had happened. Even so, the central auction house's management was still orderly. They were usually prepared for this kind of emergency response, but it was a little rare for all the gatekeeping divine beasts to fall at once. A tall woman in a cheongsam with an almost perfect figure and a communications jade in her hand gave instructions on the spot. Her name was Chen Yanan, the head of the central auction house's management team, and she was responsible for maintaining order in the auction house. Team 1, listen to my command, immediately use the backup gatekeeping divine beasts. Team 2, move all 4 lion flood dragons away, and don't cause a jam in front of the auction house. Chen Yanan reacted quickly and spoke quickly. In addition, I need to report this to the president. I will personally report the situation to him, and in the meantime, you will take over maintaining order in front of the door and listen to the deputy manager's command. After entering the auction house, Wang Ling immediately heard all the arrangements in front of the door. It could only be said that this central auction house was more formidable than he had imagined. After all, this was during the 4 emperors' gathering, and it was a serious incident for the gatekeeping divine beasts to make such a mistake. However, the central auction house hadn't been thrown into disarray by this unexpected situation, which showed how well prepared their emergency response was. But after what had happened, there was suddenly more to talk about in the auction house's hall, and it instantly became even livelier. Strange, these 4 lion flood dragons are full of energy and are plump and strong. They don't look sick at all. Why did they suddenly faint? Didn't that Zhang Zidi say he was going to steal Great West Emperor's auction item today? Maybe he did it. That's right. It must be Zhang Zidi. Maybe he's already snuck in. But that doesn't make sense. Is Zhang Zidi's realm that strong? Even if he did it, is it possible for him to take down 4 divine beasts at once? God knows. He's been sneaking around all day. Maybe he managed to steal some secret medicine that instantly increased his strength. Several cultivators who had come to participate in the auction were talking loudly in the hall, and Zhang Zidi, who was pretending to be Li Ren, broke out in a cold sweat. Now, he finally knew why there hadn't been so many gatekeeping divine beasts when he had come back then. Moreover, he also knew why he was being hunted by the Great West Emperor and the president of the central auction house after the end of the auction. This bank manager was a lion flood dragon fanatic and loved his 4 lion flood dragons very much. Now that the crowd had pinned the blame on him, it was no wonder that the bank manager hated him so much. At this moment, spiritual light appeared in the sky. Above a huge cloud, a young man in golden armor appeared, holding an iron throne in his hand. He was extremely domineering. Beside him stood a snake-bodied woman. They were originally from the human race, but they were willing to accept the Great Western Emperor's implantation spell. They were implanted with the blood of a divine beast called the Snake God, and then turned into this half-beast state. Their figures were graceful, and they stood to the left and right, completely ignoring the gazes of others. They only focused on serving the golden-armored young man. That's King Tiankuan under the Great Western Emperor. Someone cried out in alarm, recognizing this person's origins. This iron throne was bestowed by the Great Western Emperor. It indicated that King Tiankuan didn't need to pay his respects in the palace of the Great Western Emperor. He could sit on equal footing with the Great Western Emperor. No one could enjoy the same treatment as King Tiankuan. This was a general who guarded the order of the Great Western Emperor in the Western region and pacified wars everywhere, and was regarded as the symbol and representative of the Great Western Emperor. No one thought that King Tiankuan would actually come to this central auction house this time. I heard that someone wants to make trouble at this auction. This king wants to see if that Zhang Zizi can steal the Chaos Immortal Stone that I, the Great Western Emperor, want to sell right under my nose. He sneered and directly stepped through the door with a majestic gait and extraordinary domineering air. In the great hall, the various powers had gathered. Batch after batch of people arrived, all of them with esteemed statuses. They were all well-known figures. Wang Ling had a hunch that some of his other companions, who had been scattered all over this world, would definitely be in this auction house at this time. The key was how to accurately distinguish them. Wang Ling's gaze was languid as he swept his eyes over everyone. Then, the Great Eastern Emperor led everyone to a private room on the upper floor. This was a VIP room, a must-have in the auction house, and it was impossible to sit here without a certain amount of wealth. As soon as she pushed the door open and entered, she was deeply attracted by the dazzling array of exquisite jade porcelain in front of her. Objects from the ancient times were extraordinary, and she was always curious about them. "Sir, if you want to sit here, you have to promise to win at least one treasure in this auction." At that moment, Wang Ling heard the voice of the team leader who had been in charge of order at the door. Chen Yanan had never seen the Great Eastern Emperor before, and when faced with him who was out incognito this time, she had no idea what kind of background this plainly dressed young man in front of her was. Thus, she kindly reminded Wang Ling that there was a minimum expenditure in this private room, and that he had to guarantee that he would win at least one treasure in this auction before he could sit. "I understand the rules." The Great Eastern Emperor smiled, then waved his hand to indicate that Zhang Zizi would pay. Li Ren had already prepared all the expenses for this for Emperor's assembly in his storage bag. The ancient cultivator's currency was the Chaos Spirit Stone, a spirit stone that combined the power of chaos, which was already extinct in modern cultivation society. Without hesitation, Zhang Zizi directly paid Chen Yanan a full 100 million Chaos Spirit Stones as a deposit for the private room. If they didn't win at least one treasure in the end, the deposit couldn't be refunded. "Sir is generous." Chen Yanan nodded in satisfaction. She was just doing things according to the rules, and didn't mean to look down on anyone. After all, the people who could enter this auction house weren't simple. After receiving the deposit, Chen Yanan personally escorted them in, then saluted at the door before slowly strolling away. "She's just a central auction house administrator, but she doesn't know the seniors?" She was incredulous. The people in the Imperial Palace rarely go out, so it's normal that she doesn't know them. Li Ren is Great Eastern Emperor's personal guard, and even fewer outsiders know about him. Zhang Zizi replied through the team voice spell, "Also, even if they're lucky enough to meet the Emperor, most people don't have enough cultivation to see his true face." This answer instantly made her understand. This effect was similar to Wang Ling's Great Shielding spell. "Great Eastern Emperor, we just spent 100 million, how much do we have left?" In the private room, Zhang Zizi immediately imitated Li Ren's tone and replied, "Your Majesty, there are 2 billion Chaos Spirit Stones left." Great Eastern Emperor was shocked. "But I remember that I only had Li Ren prepare 500 million, Zhang Zizi chuckled. "It's like this, I couldn't help it just now, and it was a little smooth. If everyone is a little smooth, they won't notice." Wang Ling, Wang Ying, Wang Zhen, Lotus Sunday. "As expected of you." Lotus Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Senior Zhang, I thought you'd changed, this is bad behavior." Zhang Zizi couldn't help sighing. Under the influence of the rule of law in modern cultivation society, it's been a long time since I've done something like this except for when I have to carry out missions. But now that I'm back here, I still can't help it. It's a conditioned reflex, I can't blame it all on me. It's fine, if I don't use the money later, I'll donate it all. I'll just think of it as robbing the rich to help the poor. Chapter 1864. Casually taking advantage of others was Zhang Zistiel's old habit. According to the data from several previous experiments on Zhang Zistiel by the higher-ups of Battle Sect, Zhang Zistiel's hands and brain were completely separate. That was to say, when Zhang Zistiel took advantage of others, 7 out of 10 of them were purely passive skills, which would suddenly activate. Walking on the street, from one end to the other, there would always be something in his pocket that even Zhang Zistiel had no memory of. Everyone was helpless about this. Although they had already tried their best to help Zhang Zistiel correct this bad habit, he still occasionally couldn't help it. Senior Zhang's ability to take advantage of others has always been amazing. Lotus Sun smiled helplessly. But won't Senior Zhang's actions affect the course of history? Absolutely not. East Great Emperor also laughed. Zhang Zestiel from ancient times was also present at today's auction. Even if someone else discovers that something is missing, in the end, they will think that it was Zhang Zestiel from ancient times. Everyone, this was the first time in his life that he had ever seen someone use this method of framing himself. The course of history, the inevitability of history, hiding in East Great Emperor's body, Wang Ling carefully pondered these 2 points, and became increasingly curious about the mastermind behind the scenes. He rarely had the experience of being arranged by someone else like this. Although he was a little unhappy, he also felt a rare sense of novelty. If the other party had the ability to set him up, didn't that mean that this person had the strength to fight him? He wasn't very curious. What Baizha? What god of the grave? He didn't care about these rotten fish and shrimps. As a progressive young man in the modern cultivation society's education system, he felt that he should look to the long-term future, and always had expectations for the future. He looked forward to the appearance of someone who could truly unlock all his seals and let him fight to his heart's content. Heavenly Room 1. Who on earth is that person? It feels a little special. In Room 9, West Great Emperor's representative, King Tiankuan, spoke lightly. The snake maid next to him bent over and asked, "Should we check his identity?" King Tiankuan thought for a bit, then waved his hand. Forget it. Anyone who can afford to sit in this private room isn't an ordinary person. There's no need to deliberately test who the other party is. We'll know when the auction begins. His gaze was fixed on the private room Wang Ling and the others were in, and there was some interest in his eyes. Soon, the auction began. A young man in a black robe and the auctioneer, Miss Chen Yanan, went on stage together to host the auction. Many people were surprised that such a young man would be the auctioneer of this auction. Isn't he too young? It's an important auction during the assembly of the 4 emperors, and they actually let a hothead be the auctioneer? If the auction item is a heaven treasure, will he faint as soon as he touches it? Don't look down on this little brother. His name is Lu Renwen. I heard that he's the son of the Central Auction House's president. At the age of 9, he already had a sage body. He's stronger than many of you sitting here. The moment he said that, many people instantly fell silent. Becoming a sage at the age of 9. What kind of concept was that? Without a doubt, he was a genius. For a long time, the identity of the president of the Central Auction House had been a mysterious existence in the hearts of many people. But they had never thought that this president's son would be so heaven-defying. If the son's aptitude was already like this, then wouldn't the father's talent be even more astonishing? Wang Ling sat in the VIP room at the top, taking in everything at a glance. There were also auction houses like this in modern cultivation society, but Wang Ling had never been interested in the magic treasures being auctioned. None of them could beat the things in his king's treasure pants. Can I temporarily join the auction? Wang Ying asked. This was something that was not allowed in the modern cultivation society. Modern cultivators were very particular about rules and regulations, and required that all prepared items for auction be rigorously appraised in advance to ensure that there were no errors. They absolutely weren't allowed to join the auction midway. This was because there was a huge risk of substandard or fake goods. After all, it was very difficult to appraise a magic treasure in a very short period of time. This was a great test of an appraiser's ability, and if there was a mistake in the appraisal, the substandard or fake goods would be sold. Then in modern society, this auction house's life would come to an end. But it was very clear that in the eternal world, auction houses didn't have that many complicated rules. Hearing Wang Ying's question, East Great Emperor immediately replied in the team voice spell, of course. But there are requirements for the items to be auctioned. Why, do you want to add something to the auction? Won't it affect the course of history? Wang Ying asked cautiously. No. East Great Emperor shook his head without hesitation. After receiving his reply, Wang Ying also received Wang Ling's instructions, and continued to communicate with East Great Emperor. Very well, I'll give you something to sell later. As soon as the voice in the private room fell, the first item from the auction house was brought to the stage. It was an extremely exquisite bowl-shaped vessel that was completely transparent. It was made of a material similar to jade, and even its luster was similar. However, this was definitely not an ordinary jade bowl, but rather an undying artifact that was nurtured from the primal chaos. A natural all-life bowl, a treasure born from chaos. It has a 20% concentration of chaos. Wearing white gloves, the president's son, Lu Renwen, introduced the bowl's origin to everyone in a very professional manner. He touched it directly with his hands, completely unafraid of the primal chaos chi that seeped out of this chaos weapon. With the help of the projector ball magic treasure, an image of the bowl was magnified into the air, so that all the auction participants could clearly see all the details of the bowl. In the end, she's Jiaochu with a sage body. She's too strong to directly touch a chaos weapon. My focus seems to be wrong. A bowl with a 20% concentration of chaos is indeed very rare. But why is it called the all-life bowl? A lot of people were curious. Then, Lu Renwen began to introduce its currently known effects in more detail. After many experiments in this line, the results show that the all-life bowl has the effect of replication. The all-life bowl has the effect of replication. For example, as long as you place an intact elixir in the bowl, after a period of time, a new replicated elixir will be completely replicated in the bowl. However, the efficacy of the replicated elixir will be reduced to 52% to 78% of the original elixir, and it will consume the all-life bowl's concentration of chaos. The concentration of chaos can recover on its own. As long as you're not greedy and don't overuse it in one go, you can maintain this ability. Of course, if the concentration of chaos is directly replicated to zero, the bowl will directly shatter. The precise calculation and the incomparably detailed introduction of the magic treasure directly proved the professionalism of the central auction house. And Lu Renwen's introduction instantly caused many of the cultivators present to be tempted. To be able to directly replicate elixirs. If a high-quality treasure or tonic was placed inside, once the replication was successful, it meant that one could absorb even more medicinal efficacy. Furthermore, as long as one wasn't greedy, this bowl could be used continuously. This was undoubtedly a huge temptation to the cultivators who were bitterly searching for a breakthrough in the ancient times. Chapter 1865. This was a chaos tool with a special function. It was very unusual. However, in reality, there were countless chaos tools that were born naturally in the universe that had special functions. There was a dazzling variety of abilities. But most of them were useless and impractical, and could only be broken down into fine particles and refined into chaos crystals to help the ancient ones cultivate. But this life and all things bowl's function was a little unusual, and actually had the special ability of a treasure bowl. Wang Ling felt that if he could enchant it, the replica created by this bowl might be far more powerful than the original. But he wasn't interested in this bowl. Even if these ancient ones were going to fight over it, it was just a bowl to him. Among the Heaven's Path techniques, his Great Replication technique could perfectly achieve this function. In the next few minutes, Qin Yanan was in charge of delivering the bowl upstairs to the VIP rooms that were interested in it. The god-level tycoons in the VIP rooms had the right to touch and appraise it at close range. If they were interested, they just needed to light the red spirit lantern hanging in front of the door. After injecting some spirit energy into it, the lantern would light up completely. This bowl is very good. The concentration of chaos is also suitable, and there's a lot of room for improvement. If you take it to an expert refiner and modify it, it'll have a bright future, said an old woman. This was none other than Madame Shanxiu, the head of Immortal Mountain sect. This was a rare praise from an almighty, and instantly made everyone even more interested in the bowl. Just when Wang Ling thought that someone was going to make an extremely outrageous bid, in the end, in the main hall below, a young man in a luxurious outer robe raised his hand. I bid 10,000 chaos spirit stones. Wang Ling choked when he heard this. 10,000 chaos spirit stones. He had thought that this bowl would cost at least 1 million. Furthermore, everyone present seemed to have brought a lot of money with them, ranging from millions to tens of millions. Otherwise, Zhang Zipei wouldn't have been able to steal so much at once. In the end, Wang Ling was a little surprised that the person below had only bid 10,000. Chaos weapons are so cheap. Wang Ying was also amazed, and immediately asked. It's not that chaos weapons are cheap, it's that chaos spirit stones are valuable. Everyone here is a dignitary, so it's normal for them to bring a lot of money. But this is how things should be, Zhang Zipei answered. It was only now that Wang Ling finally understood how wasteful it was for East Great Emperor to directly have Zhang Zi stake 100 million spirit stones for this VIP room. The East Great Emperor also smiled. It's mainly because this is the first auction item. He wouldn't ask for such a high price. The good stuff was at the back. Don't look at how restless these people are. In fact, they are all very cunning. Senior, I have a question. Doesn't the auction house set a minimum price? Lotus Sun asked. According to the Central Auction House's rules, there is no reserve price for the first auction item. It can be considered a special benefit of the auction house, the East Great Emperor replied. So that was how it was, the others nodded in agreement. I'll bid 11,000 Chaos Spirit Stones. 20,000. Please don't fight with me. I'm determined to get this bowl. This time, Wang Ling was completely bewildered by the pricing standards of ancient times. He didn't expect the Chaos Spirit Stones to be so valuable. In his opinion, they were just broken stones floating in the primal chaos of the universe, and he could casually pick up quite a few of them. Listening to the incessant bids from below, his heart drummed. He didn't know how much he would be able to sell the thing he was going to sell for, and he was extremely nervous. In the end, the bowl was won by a young man in the hall for 160,000 Chaos Spirit Stones. The second auction item was the skull of a divine beast. Like the first auction item, the auctioneer Lu Renwen was the first to give a detailed introduction of the skull. This is the skull of the Jade Fire Primordial Thunder and Lightning Universe-shaking Devil Tianxiang 8-eyed 9-tailed steel-winged Skyfire 4-legged beast. After Lu Renwen finished speaking, Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, Wang Ying and Wang Zhen were all stupefied. How could the name of this divine beast be so long? Why couldn't it be abbreviated? It was such a long list, he really couldn't remember it wrong. But as a professional auctioneer, Lu Renwen still showed his professional attitude. Jade Fire Primordial Thunder and Lightning Universe-shaking Devil Tianxiang 8-eyed 9-tailed steel-winged Skyfire 4-legged beast. As we all know, this is a very rare divine beast of the universe. Its genes and bloodline later evolved into a series of divine beasts. Kuan Peng, Cheong Qi, Bai Fang and so on, all of which are related to it by blood. Lu Renwen said, the skull of the Jade Fire Primordial Thunder and Lightning Universe-shaking Devil Tianxiang 8-eyed 9-tailed steel-winged Skyfire 4-legged beast that we got today is only a small part of it, but its value is immeasurable. It can be used to assist in cultivation, and can even be used to refine into one's own magic weapon. Perhaps there will be unexpected gains. For the second item, each bid increment must be no less than 50,000 Chaos Spirit Stones. As soon as he said that, the audience burst into an uproar. There was immediately a heated discussion. This central auction house was too powerful to actually be able to get their hands on such a rare divine beast skull. The group instantly rubbed their palms together. Wang Ling saw a few people below stand up as if they were performing a group comedy. This skull of the Jade Fire Primordial Thunder and Lightning Universe-shaking Devil Tianxiang 8-eyed 9-tailed steel-winged Skyfire 4-legged beast is something I must have. I offer 200,000 Chaos Spirit Stones. If fellow Taoists are willing to let me have it, I will be eternally grateful. Hee, do you think this skull is yours just because you said the name smoothly? Someone immediately stood up and said unconvinced. It was as if he was deliberately competing to see who had the smoothest tongue. He read out the complete string of names even faster. My lord is very interested in the skull of the Jade Fire Primordial Thunder and Lightning Universe-shaking Devil Tianxiang 8-eyed 9-tailed steel-winged Skyfire 4-legged beast, and hopes to use it in medicine. Whoever dares to snatch it, once you leave the central territory with the skull, be careful of your life. I offer 280,000 Chaos Spirit Stones. Only 280,000? Brother, there's no point in threatening others here. I offer 500,000. A middle-aged man laughed. He had slick-back blonde hair and was dressed in gorgeous clothes. Judging from his aura, he was also a big shot. No one knows this jade fire primordial thunder and lightning universe-shaking devil Tianxiang eight-eyed nine-tailed steel-winged skyfire four-legged beast better than me. It's only in my hands that it can display its true value. The opening bid of 500,000 instantly gave Wang Ling a sense of the rich and overbearing atmosphere of an auction house. Wang Ling could also see it now. For these godly tycoons, it actually didn't matter how much an item was sold for. Whether it was expensive or cheap, the first thing was to have momentum. Sometimes, an item was sold for a high price not because it was worth the money, but mostly because of the higher-ups. Chapter 1866. For the sake of a spirit beast skull, these ancient dignitaries in the hall were all in a frenzy. The skull of an ancient divine beast like this had an extraordinary origin. What was even more precious was that this skull symbolized the origin of several bloodlines. Even if he didn't use it after buying it, there was still a lot of room for appreciation if he kept it by his side. Of course, although it was good, it was still useless to him. We have to bid for this skull. I remember that you were the final winner of this skull, Zhang Zipi said at that moment. East Great Emperor nodded. Bid. Zhang Zipi, how much is appropriate? East Great Emperor, I didn't write down the specific details in my diary, but it doesn't matter. Just make sure this skull is mine. But my suggestion is that we don't bid in this round. We can put up an auction item, and use the proceeds from the auction to offset the cost. As soon as he said this, Zhang Zipi immediately looked enlightened. Right. I remember. That's what happened. Back then, you sold one thing and used the money from that thing to buy a bunch of things, but I can't remember what you sold. After all, the timeline spanned a long time, and Zhang Zipi only had vague memories of what had happened in the past, and had long since forgotten the specific details. At that moment, East Great Emperor suddenly smiled meaningfully. This thing isn't mine. It's an auction item provided by Guru Wang Ying. Wang Ling was blank when he heard this. He hadn't expected things to fall back on him so soon. He had been thinking about what to sell, but according to old Wang's family rules, he couldn't use his own abilities to make money, so it was obviously inappropriate to take out the divine objects in Wang Zhibao's pants for auction. After thinking for a long time, a slender object with a golden flash and a vortex finally appeared in front of East Great Emperor. What powerful spirit power! No. It's not just spirit power, there are many other sources of energy. There's also rich primal chaos chi. East Great Emperor's eyes instantly lit up. There was no doubt that this shiny slender object gave him a pleasant surprise, as if he had drawn a golden legend. His reaction was quick, and he immediately lit the lantern in front of the VIP room to call the appraiser upstairs. Come, take a look. How much can this item be sold for? The East Great Emperor had a confident look on his face as he handed the golden thread to the appraiser. The appraiser took it with both hands. Before he could appraise it, he smelled a strong fragrance. After a moment of careful observation, the auctioneer revealed an incomparably shocked expression. Forgive this old man's poor eyesight. I really can't tell what kind of divine beast's hair this is. So, you can't sell it? No, of course it can be sold. The old appraiser looked excited. This thing is too strong. Not only does a tiny strand of hair emit a refreshing fragrance like a spring breeze, it actually contains such a powerful energy. If we can obtain this divine beast's hair, we can use it to refine elixirs or use it to refine weapons. There will be extraordinary benefits. It can even be used as the core of a formation. With this hair as the eye of the formation, it can change the flow of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, aiding in the cultivation of spiritual chi. If the sect is built around this formation, they won't have to worry about the loss of spiritual chi for thousands of years. This introduction made everyone dumbfounded. Lotus Sun laughed. Is it really that valuable? Could old Sir have made a mistake? This old man definitely won't make a mistake. It's just that I can't tell what kind of divine beast's hair it is, so I wanted to ask. Sorry, I don't know either. East Great Emperor spread his hands. I just happened to obtain it. I haven't verified what kind of divine beast it is yet. There's no other way. If we want to participate in the auction, we can only package it up for this hair, the appraiser said. Package it up? How? Wang Zhen asked. It's to perfect the information on this divine beast's hair. Make up a story. The old appraiser wasn't surprised as he said, for example, do you really think there's a divine beast with such a long name? That's just something we made up. It's actually made up. Lotus Sun was shocked. There's no other way. In order to make the product look better, we can only package it up. The appraiser said, the name is long to make people feel unfamiliar with this divine beast. But all the participants in the auction are dignitaries in the cultivation world, and it's impossible for them to publicly say that they don't know the origin of this divine beast. Thus, no one will care about the authenticity of this divine beast's name. On the contrary, in order to show that they are familiar with this divine beast, no matter how long the name is, they'll say it without a single mistake. Otherwise, do you think that such a long name is for those unscrupulous biographers to fill up the word count? I see. Lotus Sun was enlightened. Wang Ling, the appraiser, I'm telling you all this because I want to tell you that we're on the same team now. In order to sell it at a high price, we need everyone's cooperation. No matter how outrageous the story is, you have to stay calm. Lotus Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But we don't know how to make up stories. At most, we can think of a name. The appraiser thought for a while, then said calmly, that's easy. Just think of a name, and leave the rest to us. A few minutes later, Lu Renwen received this piece of divine beast hair that had been added to the auction at the last minute, along with a written description. The divine beast hair had already been covered in a cover, and it was packaged extremely well. The expression on his face was very calm as he skimmed through the description, then said in a loud voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, the first temporary auction item of this auction has been produced. This is an item provided by the guest in Heavenly Room 1, and the proceeds from this auction can be used directly for other auctions in this auction." After saying that, he opened the black cover, and in an instant, the shiny golden hair gave off an incomparably dazzling light. Lu Renwen said, "As you can see, according to the professional appraisal results of our appraiser, this is a very, very rare piece of divine beast hair. The hair of a perfect Tianluo raccoon." What? So it's the hair of a perfect Tianluo raccoon. I've heard of this divine beast. Oh my god. Such strong spirit power, no. It's not just spirit power, there's other types of energy. Especially the density of the primal chaos chi, it's really frightening. My god, so it's a perfect Tianluo raccoon. Where on earth does the guest in room 1 come from? How can he have such a divine item? The energy in this hair is too strong, far greater than that of the skull that was just brought up. If I refine it, I might be able to attain immortality. Fill my body so that I never dry up. He himself never expected that a single strand of hair he had enchanted would actually be blown away like this. The error-free chapters of the daily life of the Immortal King will continue to be updated on the new Sea Pavilion of Books. There are no advertisements on the site, so please collect and recommend the new Sea Pavilion of Books. If you like the daily life of the Immortal King, please collect. The daily life of the Immortal King is updated the fastest in the new Sea Pavilion of Books. Chapter 1867. It was just a hair of a mythological beast, yet it could be sold for such a sky-high price. It was unprecedented in the entire history of the central auction house. No one would have thought that this mythological beast's hair would be so valuable. Although most people had never heard of this mythological beast's name and did not know where it came from, it was a fact that this strand of hair was emitting an astonishing energy. If he could refine it effectively, not only would he be able to refine pills and forge artifacts, he might even be able to comprehend the secret techniques of this divine beast from its fur. If I can comprehend the secret hidden in the hair, I will definitely be able to reach a higher level. Wang Ling was stupefied. These people were getting more and more ridiculous. This was just a strand of his hair. Wanting to comprehend a secret technique through this strand of hair was a bit too far-fetched. The person who got this strand of hair wouldn't be able to comprehend any secret techniques, they would just have a craving for crispy noodle snacks. Of course, Wang Ling had given this head this name for a deeper reason. How much he could sell it for wasn't that important to him, what was important was that he needed to test everyone's reactions with this made-up name. Those god tycoons who pretended to have heard of this divine beast's name were definitely not people from the war sect who had crossed over from the modern era. In the primordial era, there were no divine beasts called raccoons at all. Therefore, if one heard this name and did not join in the fun, they could be included in the list of suspects who were suspected of being possessed by the souls of the people of the war sect. At that moment, Wang Ling's eyes were fixed on King Tianquan, who was regarded as the representative of Great West Emperor. This person did not participate in the competition from the beginning. Not only did he not participate in the auction directly, but he also did not show much surprise on his face when he heard this strange name. In Wang Ling's opinion, King Tianquan instantly became very suspicious. He had reason to believe that there might be a little friend from Battle Sect hiding inside King Tianquan's body. However, if he was hiding inside, then his acting was too good. There was no way to find any flaws in his acting. Do you all feel this King Tianquan to be suspicious? Wang Ying asked. A little. Wang Zhen nodded. He wasn't directly involved, nor did he react strangely. Other than that, Madame Shan Xiu from the Celestial Mountain sect was also very suspicious. The two of them had not made any big moves. He seems very calm. I agree with Brother Wang Zhen. I also feel that these two are a little strange, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Lotus Sun also joined in the discussion. She frowned slightly. Her intuition told her that things weren't as simple as they seemed. While everyone on Wang Ling's side was secretly speculating, King Tianquan, who had remained calm all this time, suddenly stood up unexpectedly. 3 million Chaos Spirit Stones, I'll take it. The moment he opened his mouth, he offered 3 million. It was a price that crushed the entire audience. No one expected that the extremely powerful King Tianquan in the West would choose to make a move at this time. Wang Ling had thought that given King Tianquan's level of influence, as long as he made a move, there probably wouldn't be many people who would dare compete for him for fear of offending him. If it was an ordinary auction house, it would definitely develop according to the above trend. However, it was different here. Just as King Tianquan had said at the beginning, those who could enter the central auction house all possessed extraordinary identities. Now that King Tianquan was directly participating in the auction, more people became interested in Wang Ling's hair. Who was this person? King Tianquan. He was known as the representative and embodiment of the Great West Emperor. Even such a person was participating in the auction. Furthermore, the moment he opened his mouth, he offered a frighteningly high price, which proved the value of this hair. Sure enough, it's just as I guessed. This divine beast hair is extraordinary. Even King Tianquan has joined the competition. Everyone, King Tianquan is currently bidding 3 million Chaos Spirit Stones. Is there a higher bid? At that moment, the auctioneer, Lu Renwen, struck while the iron was hot with a small hammer and seized the opportunity. He used his words to goad more people into bidding high prices. This is a rare divine beast hair. Even if you don't know how to use it, as long as you keep it by your side, it can bring you good luck. After all, this divine beast is called a mascot. Lu Renwen's words immediately caused the eyes of Wang Ling and the others in room 1 to light up. Lotus Sun, seniors, he said, mascot. Did I hear that right? Zhang Zi snickered. You didn't hear wrong, Miss Rong. I heard it too. This Lu Renwen has probably already guessed our identities, so he's probably one of us. Wang Ying nodded and agreed with Zhang Zi's suggestion. He's checking the code with us. After all, not many people know this code name, so it can only be one of us. It's just that we don't know who on earth is living in this Lu Renwen's body. Wang Zhen, let's wait a few more rounds. There's bound to be a time when he reveals his special characteristics. While they were discussing, Madame Shan Xiu, the leader of Immortal Mountain sect who had been silent all this time, also spoke up at that moment and joined the bidding. Madame Shan Xiu, I bid 5 million Chaos Spirit Stones and an original copy of the 9-star Melody Array. The 9-star Melody Array was a divine grade array from ancient times, and was ranked above Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow. According to the standards of the modern cultivation world, this formation was at least at the 11th level. The most important thing was that Madame Shan Xiu had taken out the original copy of the array, which was the only original copy and had even more collectible value. This was a direct exchange of valuable items, which was also within the scope of the central auction house's permission. Madame Shan Xiu's participation made the people at the scene even more excited. Now that everyone knew that this divine beast's fur was a good thing, they didn't want to miss it. I bid 6 million Chaos Spirit Stones and 20 bottles of Missing You liquid. At that moment, a young man with slicked back hair spoke up. He was the owner of a famous sex toy store from ancient times. The Missing You liquid was the treasure of the store that he had personally developed. The advertising slogan was simple and crude, "Treasure, I'm getting an infusion." What liquid? Missing Unite. Although it was once called a greasy joke, the effect was indeed genuine. As long as it was sprayed on the body, it would automatically attract true love. Only true love would not dislike this greasy and be willing to approach it. This potion is very famous. It's the key to finding a Dao partner. It's expensive to manufacture. Of course, there are also people who are spurned during the effect period after applying it, but they usually have to find the reason from themselves. If you can't get a wife after applying it, it means that there's no true love in this world, Zhang Zi snickered. As more and more people participated in the bidding, the auction house became even more heated. In the end, no one mentioned the Chaos Spirit Stones anymore. They all used their treasures to exchange. I bid 2 divine-grade spiritual techniques and a divine-grade cultivation technique. I can use the complete ancient dragon remains to exchange. Hee, none of you can do it. I bid 100 kilograms of Kushuan's moral integrity. Chapter 1868. 100 kilograms of Ku Xian's moral integrity. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the audience went wild. Everyone knew that this thing was worthless to those who weren't interested in it. After all, Ku Xian's moral integrity had already been shattered a long time ago, falling to the ground one by one. No one paid attention to the previous bid of this person who also didn't have moral integrity. They continued to use their unique heavenly treasures to participate in the auction. I have a clear sky ruler. I've decided to use it to exchange. At that moment, a young man's voice came from VIP room 3. His voice wasn't very loud, but it was deafening to the ears. The crowd was in an uproar. This clear sky ruler was an immortal treasure of the Southern Region Imperial Palace. It contained the life force of the Southern Region Imperial Palace and was also a prize that the Southern Region Imperial Palace had provided 100 years ago. I remember that the year we had the clear sky ruler, the winner was an itinerant cultivator called Broken Sword. Who is this person? Broken Sword? But I feel like he's younger than Broken Sword. Could he be Broken Sword's son? Many people started to discuss the identity of this young man. Broken Sword doesn't have a son. You don't have to guess anymore. I know this guest. This young man is called Tang Moyuan, the descendant of the famous refiner Tang Root No. 9. So it's him, everyone understood. Tang Zhen's nickname was 9, and he was also a famous blacksmith. He was extremely famous since ancient times. Although they didn't know why this clear sky ruler fell into Tang Moyuan's hands, Tang Root number 9 was a very righteous person. Since it was in his son's hands, he must have made some sort of deal with Broken Sword back then. However, no one expected to use the clear sky ruler to exchange for this divine beast's fur. The value of this clear sky ruler was at least 20 million chaos spirit stones. It had already crushed everyone else's bid. However, at this moment, King Tiankuan made a bid again. No one knew if it was because of his superiors, but he wasn't willing to give up. I bid 30 million chaos spirit stones. I'll add another chaos spirit stone. The moment he spoke, the crowd fell into a dead silence. This was something the Great West Emperor had plundered from the Eastern region's imperial palace. He had wanted to participate in this auction, but he hadn't expected King Tiankuan to take it out for an exchange. In fact, King Tiankuan had his own considerations for this decision. He had come to the central auction house because of the notice letter that Zhang Zizi had stolen. If they waited for the Chaos Immortal Stone to be auctioned, it would take a long time, and there would be all sorts of unstable factors. But now, if he were to exchange it as the product of the transaction, once the transaction was completed, then the Chaotic Immortal Stone would have nothing to do with him. Neither he nor the Great West Emperor would suffer any loss of face. After all, Zhang Zipei said in the notice letter that he would steal the mixed immortal stones during the auction. Now that he was not playing according to the rules, Zhang Zipei might lose his footing because of this. Of course, King Tiankuan did not come up with this idea on his own. Instead, it was the opinion of the two snake girl attendants beside him. You've done well. When we return, I will take good care of you. King Tiankuan was very satisfied with this suggestion. 30 million chaotic immortal stones and a mixed immortal stone that was also worth 30 million, this could already be called a sky-high price. Wang Ling was stupefied, he had never expected his hair to be so valuable. Thinking back to all the hair he had trimmed in the barbershop all those years ago, it was practically gold. Furthermore, it was even more valuable than gold. What should we do? He's just changing his tactic. If the transaction is completed and Senior Zhang steals the chaotic immortal stone, it will have nothing to do with him at all. That's easy. We just need to go easy on him during the transaction. At that moment, Zhang Zipei, who was playing the role of Li Ren, laughed sinisterly. Now, he completely remembered what had happened back then. Go easy. Lotus Sun was puzzled and looked a little doubtful. Just then, Zhang Zipei, who was playing the role of Li Ren, suddenly focused his gaze on an empty spot. You're there, right, Zhang Zipei? There was nothing there, and at first glance, Zhang Zipei, who was playing the role of Li Ren, seemed to be talking to the air. Don't be nervous, we have no intention of exposing you. Zhang Zipei, who was playing the role of Li Ren, snickered. No matter how you deceive other people, you can't fool me. After a while, an unfamiliar man's voice came from the private room. This voice belonged to the young Zhang Zipei. He had been hiding somewhere else, but because of King Tiankuan's sudden change of tactics, he had no choice but to move to the private room Wang Ling was in. Because once the transaction was completed, the chaotic immortal stone would be sent directly to the room under the arrangement of the auction house. Who are you? Young Zhang Zipei hadn't expected to be exposed, and was very nervous for a moment. You don't need to know who I am. I just want to tell you that we won't be making a move later. You can directly attack them when they walk down the aisle with the chaotic immortal stone. Don't have any misgivings, Zhang Zipei, who was playing the role of Li Ren, said. Zhang Zi, who was playing the role of Li Ren, snickered. He had arranged everything clearly for his younger self. Why are you helping me? Young Zhang Zipei frowned in confusion. An enemy of an enemy. We are friends. King Tiankuan is the representative of Great West Emperor, and we are his enemies. After a long silence, young Zhang Zipei didn't respond. He was very cautious as he pondered whether this was a trap or not. But at that moment, Zhang Zipei, who was playing the role of Li Ren, couldn't help taking a deep breath and saying, "You have to believe me, because I know your secret." Wang Ling, Lotus Sun and Wang Zhen were all stunned by this, and all of them looked like they were watching a show. So this was the segment where they had to reveal their dirty laundry? Wang Ling felt that he was going a little overboard in order to convince young Zhang Zipei to cooperate. "What do you know?" Young Zhang Zipei looked very nervous. "I know your fetish for women." Old Zhang Zipei said, "If you don't believe me, I can tell you directly." "Don't. I believe you." Young Zhang Zipei broke out in a cold sweat. This had really hit his soft spot. If this person really knew something and said it, this would be a large-scale social death scene. After a few more minutes, King Tiankuan finally bought Wang Ling's hair for the astronomical price of 30 million chaotic spirit stones and 1 chaotic immortal stone. But what no one expected was that while the central auction house was transporting the storage bag containing the 30 million chaotic spirit stones and the chaotic immortal stone, something unexpected happened in the end. In order to ensure the absolute safety of the transaction, the auction house had specially chosen 2 experts and Lu Renwen to personally deliver the items. However, when the items arrived at the door of Wang Ling's private room, when the items were delivered to Wang Ling's private room, the whole central auction house was suddenly filled with snow-white smoke. This smoke quickly spread throughout the entire auction room. Young Zhang Zipei was waiting for an opportunity to make a move, but what he didn't expect was that Lu Renwen's reaction was also very quick. He did his utmost to protect his auction item, and didn't give young Zhang Zipei the slightest chance to do so. He's still a little green. Old Zhang Zipei smiled slightly at that moment and just waved his sleeve. The chaotic immortal stone that Lu Renwen was guarding appeared in his palm like magic. Then, taking advantage of the chaos, he directly stuffed the chaotic immortal stone into young Zhang Zipei's hand. "Leave the rest to me, run." Chapter 1869. The chaos only lasted for a moment before it quickly returned to normal. The mixed immortal stone was stolen by the young Zhang Zi from the ancient times, and after he succeeded, he immediately retreated, not leaving a single cloud behind. In a trance, old Zhang Zizi suddenly recalled this legendary experience that spanned across the ages. At that time, he had indeed received the help of a senior. But old Zhang Zizi didn't expect that the senior who had helped him was actually himself. "Zhang Zizi! Don't let me catch you." King Tiankuan slammed the armrest of his chair, breaking it. He was flustered and exasperated. He didn't expect that Zhang Zizi would be able to get away with his trick. This was a slap to his face. And slapping his face was actually slapping the great Western Emperor's face. What a shameless thief. With the immortal stone stolen, the transaction for the divine beast's fur fell into a stalemate. King Tiankuan had lost face, but the central auction house couldn't shirk its responsibility. After all, the escorts for the transaction were all sent by the central auction house. On one side was the mysterious and extravagant guest in room 1. On the other side was the representative of the great Western Emperor, King Tiankuan, who was sitting in room 9. The central auction house didn't dare to offend either side. Thus, after the manager, Chen Yanan, asked for instructions from the higher-ups, the manager's son, the auctioneer, Lu Renwen, stepped forward to mediate. "This time, our auction house made a huge mistake. Don't worry, King Tiankuan. Since you've already bid for the divine beast's fur, it counts. As for the immortal stone, our auction house will use other treasures to make up for it. We will definitely satisfy you and the guest in room 1, Lu Renwen said respectfully. "I'm fine with it. I just want the divine beast's fur. As for what you do with it, it's none of my business." King Tiankuan snorted. His immortal stone had been brazenly stolen by Zhang Zizi, which made him feel indignant. On the other side, after Lu Renwen comforted King Tiankuan, he quickly went to room 1 with Chen Yanan. "Everyone, I'm very sorry. This is our auction house's mistake, which led to the accident during the transaction. I'm sorry for the shock." The two cupped their hands. Chen Yanan's face was shrouded in dark clouds, and the sadness she showed made people feel sorry for her. However, when she raised her head, she inadvertently saw the group of people in front of her smiling at her. She was astonished. He was even more curious about the background of the guests in room 1. He must have seen a lot of the world. Even if he wasn't a disciple of a famous sect, he was at least a member of the imperial family. He was too calm. Not only was he calm, but he was also looking at her with a smile. Just how big was his heart, this made Chen Yanan respect Wang Ling and the others even more, and she didn't dare slight them in the slightest. My apologies for startling all of you. We've already issued an Eternal Sea warrant for Zhang Zistiel's arrest in the entire universe. I will definitely avenge all of you. Chen Yanan said, as for the previous transaction, although there are 30 million Chaos Spirit Stones, I'm missing the Chaos Immortal Stones. I wonder if we can compensate you in other ways. King Tiankuan is determined to obtain that divine beast hair. That's easy. The East Great Emperor nodded and smiled. Inside his body, Wang Ying transmitted Wang Ling's instructions to him. For King Tiankuan, this was a priceless divine beast hair, but for Wang Ling, it was just his own hair. In his eyes, it wasn't worth much to begin with. As for the Chaos Immortal Stone, it was an object from the East Great Emperor's imperial palace to begin with. The East Great Emperor had collected this stone for a long time and was already tired of it. He wouldn't feel bad even if he lost it. On the contrary, he could now exchange it for something new to play with through this transaction. For the East Great Emperor, this was exactly what he wanted. That Chaos Immortal Stone is valued at around 30 million Chaos Spirit Stones. What do you want to exchange for it? Zhang Zistiel said, My lord has taken a fancy to that divine beast skull with a long name. That's easy, Lu Renwen said directly. I'll take responsibility for this divine beast skull and give it to my lord. As for the remaining 30 million, we'll calculate it separately. Now, we have two options. The first is for our bank to directly convert 30 million Chaos Spirit Stones into compensation. The second option is that in the following auction, if my lord takes a fancy to anything, he can choose anything as compensation. No matter what the final price is, our bank will bear it. The East Great Emperor waved his hand and directly made his choice without hesitation. Then let's go with the second option. That's good. Lu Renwen and Chen Yanan bowed and quickly retreated. For the East Great Emperor, Chaos Spirit Stones were just trivial money. Besides, Zhang Zistiel had stolen a lot of them previously, so they didn't lack these things at all. It would be too boring to ask for money directly. He knew that King Tiankuan also had something that he had to obtain in this auction, and with this promise from the Buyers Guild, he would be able to compete with King Tiankuan without any effort. Previously, King Tiankuan had tried to humiliate him by auctioning off the East Great Emperor's stone that he had stolen from the imperial palace. As the emperor of a territory, he naturally had to get back at him. Very quickly, order was restored at the scene. The storm quickly subsided, and the guests on both sides were very satisfied with the outcome. There was really nothing better than this. Whether it was Room 1 or King Tiankuan's Room 9, the central auction house couldn't afford to provoke them. Unless the president personally took charge, there was no way to suppress them. As the president's son, it was rare for Lu Renwen to manage such a grand auction under the backdrop of the four emperors gathering. To be honest, he was a little flustered. Although he had already inherited the memories of Lu Renwen, and could just follow his experience step by step, he was still worried that something might go wrong. Thus, he could only rely on his intuition. Fortunately, his luck had always been pretty good. Although there had been an accident just now, it had been handled very well. And most importantly, it was because of that accident that he had recognized who the guest in Room 1 was. He had deliberately left a loophole and let Zhang Zistiel steal the Chaos Spirit Stone. His goal had been to personally go upstairs and have direct contact with the guest in Room 1. Using his intuition as the only koi in the cultivation world, Qin Zong, who was now playing the role of Lu Renwen, had already made a basic judgment about Room 1. The people in room 1 were all his people who had transmigrated from the modern world. And Li Ren had to be Zhang Zistiel. It was just that Qin Zong had no idea who Wang Ling was playing. I can only take it one step at a time. He sighed in his heart. Then, he signaled with his eyes for Qin Yanan to bring out the next auction item. It was a sky-reaching praying mat. According to the data, it was something that Tao ancestor Wang had used. Chapter 1870. Generally speaking, prayer mats in the cultivation world were used for meditation, seclusion, preaching, and cultivation. A comfortable prayer mat could allow a cultivator to quickly enter a state of selflessness and be unable to extricate themselves from cultivation. Wang Ling also had such a prayer mat in his king's treasure pants, which was called the commandment prayer mat. The efficiency of meditating on it for a day was comparable to 50 years of seclusion cultivation for a regular cultivator. But for Wang Ling, this praying mat was of little value. After all, he gained experience by sleeping every day. He already couldn't restrain himself, speeding up his cultivation would be no different from courting death. According to Wang Ling's eye appraisal, the sky-reaching prayer mat in front of him was indeed a lot stronger than an ordinary prayer mat. Meditating on it for a day was comparable to 6 months of seclusion cultivation. Even if it wasn't as strong as Wang Ling's, at least the effect was genuine. Of course, Wang Ling was well aware that this sky-reaching prayer mat wasn't selling for its cultivation value. Of course, he was well aware that this sky-high praying mat wasn't being sold for its cultivation value. Of course, Wang Ling was well aware that this sky-reaching prayer mat wasn't selling for its cultivation value. As the founder of Heavenly Tao and a top expert in the eternal cultivation world, Tao ancestor Wang's name was above the 4 emperors. He was an existence that everyone worshipped and revered. At the very least, before Tao ancestor Wang had locked the immortals in the Supreme Corpse Shroud painting, his reputation in the eternal cultivation world had been resounding. Even in the great emperor's imperial palace, there was a special ancestral hall dedicated to Tao ancestor Wang. Every day, people worshipped him with incense as if he were a god. It could be said that most of the immortals were Tao ancestor Wang's believers. Or to put it more bluntly, in the modern cultivation world, they could also be called fans. But what Wang Ling hadn't expected was that the fan economy, which had already developed to a certain scale, had already been popular since ancient times. Sure enough, everything in the world was a circle. You might think you were playing some new tricks, but in fact, it could be something left behind by the ancestors. To be honest, if it wasn't for the following contents of the diary, East Great Emperor wouldn't have gotten this prayer mat. Wang Ling felt that he might buy this praying mat. He wasn't a fan of Tao ancestor Wang, but he was interested in him. Even though the East Great Emperor claimed that it didn't seem like Tao ancestor Wang's doing in the scheme of the eternal transmigration, but Wang Ling still felt that this was the number one suspect. Is this really what Tao ancestor Wang obtained? When they heard Lu Renwen introduce the information about the praying mat, many people became excited. It is indeed an item of Tao ancestor Wang. Qin Zong, who was impersonating Lu Renwen, said, according to the results of the appraisal, there is a statue of Tao ancestor Wang in the myriad spirit mountain of planet Zhongzhou. In reality, it was left behind by Tao ancestor Wang after he ascended to immortality a long time ago. After his mortal body was petrified, skilled craftsmen created it according to the petrification refinement. In order to identify whether the futon belongs to Tao ancestor Wang, the auctioneer specially made a trip to Thousand Spirit Mountain. According to this stone statue, he made a but model of Tao ancestor Wang. In the end, after a strict comparison with the indented mark on the praying mat, it was confirmed that this praying mat truly belongs to Tao ancestor Wang. Everyone fell silent. It was said that the appraisers of the central auction house were famous for putting their lives on the line in order to appraise the authenticity of treasures, but no one expected them to be this crazy, buttocks molded. Why did this sound so dirty? It was too sinful. Before coming to immemorial time, Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, and Wang Zhen had thought that the cultivators of immemorial time were a bunch of stubborn old fools. They never expected these former seniors of the cultivation world to be so good at this. They had learned something new. The starting price of this heavenly praying mat is 5 million spirit stones, and each bid must be no less than 500,000. Now, the auction officially begins. Lu Renwen dropped the hammer with a bang. After confirming that this was indeed an item of Tao ancestor Wang's, the bidding instantly began. I want it, 10 million spirit stones. Immediately, someone raised his hand and bid 10 million. Everyone was stunned by the look of someone who was determined to win the bid. Then, an even more intense bidding began. 15 million spirit stones. 20 million spirit stones. In fact, a single heavenly praying mat didn't cost that much at all. The most important thing was that it belonged to Tao ancestor Wang. Since it was something that Tao ancestor Wang had used, meditating and cultivating on it might be able to directly comprehend the heavenly Tao like Tao ancestor Wang. This belongs to Tao ancestor Wang. You don't want it? Zhang Zipei looked at East Great Emperor curiously. There are better ones later, no hurry. East Great Emperor shook his head. At that moment, Zhang Zipei also realized that even though the cultivators below were all fighting over it, none of the big clients in the private rooms upstairs made a sound. It wasn't just East Great Emperor, even Madame Shanxiu and that King Tiankuan were silent, as if they were waiting for something. Thinking of what East Great Emperor had just said, Zhang Zipei guessed that East Great Emperor must have gotten some information about the auction in advance. Very quickly, this heavenly praying mat was bought by a young member of the royal family at the high price of 50 million spirit stones. Actually, it's not worth that much money at all. What a waste, what a waste. Wang Zhen was speechless. After all, the Wang family of the domain of the gods was one of the descendants of Tao ancestor Wang, and there were many things in the family that had been passed down by Tao ancestor Wang. Wang Zhen was speechless. If he could sell it here from the modern era, he would be as rich as a country. After this heavenly praying mat, the central auction house took out 3 more items in succession. One was the expert appraisal technique, one was the 9 dragons coffin pulling experience voucher, and one was the stretching leg staring pill. They were all top-notch treasures that were priceless. The cultivators downstairs were scrambling for them, but no one was fighting for them upstairs. There was not even the slightest movement. Until the next item appeared, it was a scroll. Even its name was very domineering. It was called the Book of 9 Realms. I don't think I need to introduce the Book of 9 Realms, right? Qin Zong, who was impersonating Lu Renwen, said. As he held the Book of 9 Realms in his hand, his heart trembled slightly because this thing's reputation had spread throughout the ages. It was an existence that everyone knew about. This was because this was Tao ancestor Wang's orthodoxy certificate, which contained Tao ancestor Wang's personal signature. Tao ancestor Wang had said that no matter who obtained it, as long as they could open the Book of 9 Realms and understand the words written inside, they could become his true disciple. All these years, the Book of 9 Realms had spread far and wide in the eternal cultivation world, and some unscrupulous merchants even made a fortune by selling fake goods. That was because it was said that those who obtained the original copy of the Book of 9 Realms would see nothing in it. To this day, no one had been able to become Tao ancestor Wang's disciple. But now that the central auction house had the guarantee of such a big shop, it could be confirmed that this Book of 9 Realms was authentic. Based on the information in the diary, he knew that this scroll was what East Great Emperor was going to bid on next. But at the same time, he was very puzzled. Because he now knew who Tao ancestor Wang's true disciple was. That was to say, after East Great Emperor obtained the Book of 9 Realms, something else had happened, and in the end, Peng Shiren had picked up the bargain, 100 million spirit stones. Sure enough, someone immediately spoke. It was King Tiankuan's voice. He didn't listen to Lu Renwen's bid or reserve price at all, and bid 100 million, which horrified everyone present. East Great Emperor wasn't polite at all. 200 million spirit stones. He didn't give in at all, and looked like he was going to fight it out with King Tiankuan. Set a small target first, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's house. Chapter 1871. The original copy of the Book of the Nine Schools, the so-called only threshold for Tao ancestor Wang to recruit true disciples, which had been pursued by cultivators throughout the cultivation world since ancient times, had now appeared in the central auction house. To be able to get his hands on such an item, it was enough to prove that the president of this auction house wasn't an ordinary person. Wang Ling was deeply curious about this. There were so many auction houses in the Central Territory Galaxy, but only the Central Auction House stood tall and was favored by the dignitaries of the four territories. The fact that the four emperors could directly auction things from their imperial palaces here showed just how powerful they were. Who is this president? Can we see him? Wang Ying asked. This was a question she was asking on Wang Ling's behalf. But at the same time, Wang Ying was also very curious. Moreover, they shared the same view: the president of this central auction house wasn't an ordinary person. If he was strong enough, he might even be suspected of orchestrating this ancient transmigration drama. After careful consideration, Wang Ling felt that this president was the most suspicious. As the president of the central auction house, not only did this person know about the four emperors since ancient times, he also had a certain status in the four territories. Most importantly, he also had all kinds of rare treasures that he had obtained through odd channels. This kind of person was definitely strong, and from what Wang Ling knew so far, this person was used to operating behind the scenes. This was also in line with the style of the person behind the diary. I've only seen the president once. When I suddenly looked back, he was in the shadow of the lamp. East Great Emperor suddenly sighed with emotion in the team voice spell. You didn't see his face? No, East Great Emperor said. The Great East Emperor said, however, through that blurry facial outline, this Lu Renwen does look very similar to him. He should be his biological son without a doubt. Wang Ling was speechless. He just wanted to know who this president was and more detailed information on him. He hadn't asked if he was a cuckold or not. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He felt that East Great Emperor's answer was probably all he knew about the situation. Even East Great Emperor wasn't clear about the president's identity, let alone other people. At this point, Wang Ling fell into deep thought. At that moment, the bidding had already reached the sky-high price of 500 million spirit stones. King Tiankuan's lips twitched as he raised the price, trying to use this price to intimidate all his competitors. However, he underestimated how fanatical cultivators were about the Book of Nine Realms. Especially in the central auction house. Those who were seated here were all nobles. Faced with such an object, it was impossible for them to give up so easily. Even those who weren't seated in the VIP suites felt the same way. They were all royalty of their respective domains, and while their status might not be as high as King Tiankuan's, they still wanted to fight for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hence, in less than 10 minutes, the Book of Nine Realms had been raised to a heaven-defying price of 700 million chaotic spirit stones. Lu Renwen, who played Qin Zong, wiped his sweat. In fact, he knew very well that as long as the guest from Room 1 continued to participate in the auction, the Book of the Nine Realms would definitely fall into the hands of the guest from Room 1. After all, they had made a one-sided promise before. What if the guest in Room 1 doesn't give up and sends it out? Is it really okay? Chen Yanan asked worriedly. While the two of them were auctioning, they were also secretly communicating via voice transmission. Integrity first. Lu Renwen replied, since it's something I promised, I'll naturally do it. Besides, we didn't lose too much. Although it took some effort to get this Book of the Nine Realms, it actually didn't cost too many resources to purchase. Chen Yanan asked, how much did it cost to get it? Qin Zong replied truthfully, including the travel expenses and the cost of exploration and excavation, it was about 200,000 chaotic spirit stones. Chen Yanan was shocked. So cheap. Qin Zong, father, had special channels, so he got it. It was found in the tomb of a cultivator who failed to break through to the progenitor realm. Chen Yanan, why was it in the tomb? Qin Zong, for something like this, the person who gets it will definitely have selfish motives. Since he can't become Tao Ancestor Wang's disciple, he naturally doesn't want others to become Tao Ancestor Wang's disciple. But the Book of the Nine Realms is made of special materials and cannot be destroyed, so the original owner of the Book of the Nine Realms would naturally choose to take it into the tomb and let it be sealed underground forever. Chen Yanan, then how did the president know? Qin Zong shrugged. I'm not sure. You know, I've never met father in my entire life. We basically communicate through communication talismans. Chen Yanan, at this moment, King Tiankuan, who was in the VIP room, finally couldn't sit still anymore. He directly kicked open the door of the VIP room, no longer able to maintain his composure. 1 billion chaotic spirit stones. He shouted loudly. This time, it really shocked many people here. Everyone sighed. After all, this was King Tiankuan, the representative of the Great West Emperor. Even though they were nobles, in terms of foundation, they were still inferior to King Tiankuan. Many people were helpless. Although they were extremely eager to get this Book of the Nine Realms, they could only give up in the end. According to the rules of the central auction house, if one randomly bid and caused trouble, and if one didn't have enough money to complete the transaction, one would be permanently blacklisted. With such a punishment system in place, even though many people here were dissatisfied with King Tiankuan's arrogant and indulgent attitude, they had no choice but to give up bidding. But there were still people who didn't give up. After many people knew that they couldn't get the Book of the Nine Realms, they naturally turned their attention to the person in room 1 who was competing with King Tiankuan, and the Immortal Mountain sect leader, Madame Shanxiu. 1 billion chaotic spirit stones, even King Tiankuan felt his heart ache. However, he had no choice but to fork out this money. This was because he believed that he had the potential to become Tao Ancestor Wang's true disciple. Friend in room 1, as the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't snatch what others love. This Book of the Nine Realms is something that I must get. I hope that you can let me have it, King Tiankuan said. His tone was fierce, but it was hard to tell whether it was a request or a threat. The Great East Emperor was silent for a moment. Then, King Tiankuan said again, how about this? You withdraw from the auction and give it to me. After I take a look, if I confirm that I have no fate with Tao Ancestor Wang, I can sell the Book of the Nine Realms to you. Of course, you don't need to spend my 1 billion chaotic spirit stones. You only need to pay 800 million. What do you think? King Tiankuan made a solemn vow. His words caused everyone to sigh with emotion. Such a proposal sounded like a veteran. In this day and age, everyone felt that they had the potential to become Tao Ancestor Wang's true disciple. Since that was the case, how could they easily give up the Book of the Nine Realms when they had the capital to support them? King Tiankuan's proposal was full of schemes. If he directly became a true disciple, he would turn the entire eternal world upside down. He might even inherit the throne of the new great emperor. However, if he didn't succeed, he could just sell the Book of the Nine Realms. It wouldn't be a big loss for him. What a shrewd man. However, King Tiankuan's wishful thinking was wrong. The Great East Emperor still chose to increase the price. 1 billion chaotic spirit stones. King Tiankuan's mouth twitched. No need for 800 million. You can just pay half of the final transaction price. The Great East Emperor didn't listen to his nonsense. 3 billion chaotic spirit stones. King Tiankuan, how about this, let me have a look first. If nothing happens after I read it, I will give it to you directly. The Great East Emperor thought for a moment and continued to bid. 4 billion chaotic spirit stones. King Tiankuan, don't go too far. The Great East Emperor, 5 billion chaotic spirit stones. King Tiankuan, good boy. Just you wait for this king. The Great East Emperor, 6 billion chaotic spirit stones. King Tiankuan, at this point, everyone in the auction house, including King Tiankuan, fell silent. King Tiankuan didn't even increase the price. The Great East Emperor increased the price by 100 million chaotic spirit stones every time he spoke. He didn't dare to open his mouth. Even King Tiankuan had never seen such a rich and overbearing method. In the end, the Book of the Nine Realms successfully became the Great East Emperor's possession. King Tiankuan had never suffered such grievances before. He was so angry that his body was trembling. At this time, the two lamia standing beside him were also whispering into his ears, urging him on. Snake Woman number 1 said flirtatiously, "King Tiankuan, there's no need to be angry. We can just snatch it from him later." Snake Woman number 2 echoed, "Yes, King Tiankuan, money doesn't necessarily mean strength. We can just go up and fight him head-on. We can't lose this momentum." After being shocked by the two snake women, King Tiankuan, who was already dizzy with anger, couldn't care so much anymore. Killing intent rose in his heart. He wanted to kill every single person in room 1. For the vast majority of cultivators, Tao Ancestor Wang is too illusory. He is an existence that they can only look at but cannot reach. The older generation of cultivators have feelings for Tao Ancestor Wang, but in the ancient times, the people these new generation of cultivators came in contact with the most were us. In other words, the 4 emperors. At this point, the East Great Emperor couldn't help but scratch the back of his head. Ha ha ha, it's a little embarrassing to say this. Actually, the ones worshipped in this temple are the 4 of us. Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, and Wang Zhen were stupefied at the same time. Taoism worships the 3 pure ones, Buddhism worships Tathagata, but in ancient times, they worshipped the 4 emperors. If he went to the temple now, it meant that the Great East Sovereign would worship himself. That was too shameful. That is to say, the temple worships the 4 of you at the same time. Then if your beliefs are different, will you directly start fighting? Wang Zhen couldn't help asking. You don't know this. At that moment, Zhang Zi opened his mouth to explain on their behalf with the air of an elder. Only the central region's solar system is special, and the temple has statues of the 4 emperors. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, everyone worships their own. The region they live in depends on which emperor they worship. Of course, there are also the more moderate and steady faction that worships all 4 at home and doesn't offend anyone. As for the central region's temple, because the 4 regions jointly sent ancient city guards, even if they have different beliefs, they won't start fighting over them. What about the faces of the statues of the 4 emperors? Naturally DIY. Zhang Zi replied, using a more modern term. Normal cultivators can't clearly see the faces of the 4 emperors when they are at full strength, so there have always been many versions of the true faces of the 4 emperors among the people. Naturally, the facial features that are used to carve the statues of the 4 emperors are the ones that are just right, the kind of facial features that are naturally dignified without being angry. So that was it. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun nodded inwardly. The matters of the eternal world and some unique folk cultures were uncommon in modern cultivation society, and were knowledge that couldn't be learned in textbooks. This piqued the interest of both of them. As for Wang Zhen, he knew a little more about the eternal world than Wang Ling and Lotus Sun, but that was just some things passed down by the elders, and a lot of things were hearsay. Now that he had taken this opportunity to come to the eternal world, it could be considered a supplementary lesson. The temple closest to the central auction house was 500 li away. Zhang Zi secretly hired a Pegasus carriage to take everyone there. Everyone sat in the carriage and sped through the sky. When they approached the divine temple, the body of the East Great Emperor began to emit the radiance of divinity. Colorful runes of 7 colors bloomed from his body like a lotus, dazzling and dazzling. There was no sound at all, but it gave off a terrible divine aura. Oh no! I forgot about this, the East Emperor muttered to himself. Something was wrong, and he quickly made a hand seal to force the spirit power that was involuntarily emitting back into his body. Why is it like this? Lotus Sun was completely stunned. Just now, It was as if rainbow bridges had been set up on the East Emperor's body, and his whole body seemed to be releasing fireworks, which was very beautiful. Because of the worship in the temple, someone is communicating with me, and that's why it's like this. This is a kind of spiritual response. It can be considered a response to their wishes. The East Emperor sighed. For example, when I'm communicating with you now, I hear a lot of wishes in my mind. They are all made by my believers. Are there any more excessive wishes? Wang Ying asked with a mischievous smile. The Immortal Ascension Assembly is coming up. Someone wants to get a good ranking. Immortal Ascension Assembly? This is an assembly held jointly by the royal families of the 4 territories, and its purpose is to select some independent cultivators who are scattered among the people. They can become a member of the royal family through this Immortal Ascension Assembly without any family or background, Zhang Zi said with a snicker. You can do that? Wang Ying was stunned. It's the result of one's own efforts, of course. If a male cultivator has good grades, he can choose to marry into the family. If he has the money, he can also marry openly. If a female cultivator has good grades, she can choose to marry a member of the royal family she likes and directly become the first wife. Zhang Zi said with a snicker, and once the marriage is completed, the child they give birth to will also be a member of the royal family. Don't you think that in modern times, the ancient ones with royal status are even stronger? The power of bloodline inheritance is very realistic. But I remember that in the past Immortal Ascension assemblies, the royal families that were most favored by the top independent cultivators were the Clear Light sect of the East Domain and the Great sect of the North Domain. Yes, the leading independent cultivators in the Immortal Ascension Assembly have the right to choose all the royal families who participate. The number of people who chose these 2 royal families is also the highest. The East Great Emperor nodded. Wang Ying, that doesn't sound like a very excessive wish. The East Emperor, but they're only 3 years old. Everyone, Lotus Sun, then Senior, why don't you find someone to help you filter your wishes? East Great Emperor, the major temples do have a mechanism like the wish card, but can a wish written in the wish card be called a wish? On the card is written, I have no desires, but in my heart, I want them all. And it's very expensive to hire people. Every temple in the eternal world has to send someone to guard it. Where would this emperor get so much money? Lotus Sun, but Senior, don't you have a lot of believers? Don't they give money to those who make wishes? The East Emperor laughed. You don't really think that the money in the temple's wish box will reach my hands, do you, everyone? Chapter 1873. East Emperor's words were so true that for a moment, everyone was speechless and unable to say a word. Not to mention the eternal world, even the Buddhist disciples in the modern cultivation world didn't believe that the money in the merit box never belonged to Buddha. Monk Golden Lamp, as the most sacred Buddhist monk, should be well aware of this. But why had Madame Shan Xiu, the leader of Immortal Mountain sect, asked them to meet at the temple? Was it because he was a believer of one of the 4 emperors, or was there a deeper meaning to this? Wang Ling furrowed his brow thoughtfully. He had a vague feeling that this Shan Xiu wasn't simple, and might even be on the same side as them. Of course, this was just Wang Ling's own speculation. He had a hunch that their trip to the temple would be unusually lively. When the speeding carriage landed, Wang Ling saw an unusually mysterious and magnificent building. The ivory temple's walls were carved with all kinds of runes from ancient times, and the environment inside was very good, with small bridges, flowing water, rockery, and fountains. According to Zhang Zizi, the temple in the central region was built in a unique style that blended the styles of the 4 regions so that believers could devoutly worship the emperors they believed in. Compared with ordinary temples, the temple in the central region had 3 additional halls, which were located in the east, south, west, and north directions. All the halls were of the same standard, and even the building area was strictly required to be exactly the same. This was also done in order to appease the believers. After arriving here, East Emperor silently observed the surroundings of the temple. There were many believers here, incense burning, and an endless stream of cultivators making wishes. East Emperor knew that in addition to Madame Shan Xiu, someone else would come looking for him. King Tiankuan definitely wouldn't miss this opportunity. The ancient city guards might be terrifying, but they wouldn't be able to intimidate this king of the western region. If the other party really dared to make a move in the central region, and most importantly, this was a temple with a statue of West Emperor. If East Emperor chose to make a move here, he might be able to get a long-range boost from West Emperor. But East Emperor wasn't very worried, because he still had that senior surnamed Wang hidden in his body. This was the greatest killing weapon he could bring out now. Once he brought it out, it would be enough to crush everything. However, the four emperors' assembly had yet to officially begin, and the great East Emperor did not wish to reveal his identity so early. After all, no one had ever seen the great emperor's true appearance. They had to rely on their Dharma images to identify them. Therefore, if he really had to face King Tiankuan in the future, the East Great Tharch did not intend to use his Dharma idol to fight. If he, a supreme emperor, had to use his Dharma power to deal with a mere royal highness, it would make him feel very embarrassed. As a great emperor, the East Great Emperor rarely came to a place like the Divine Temple. After all, he would feel strange if he paid homage to it himself. However, he had no choice but to pay a visit today because of the needs of history. In the huge Divine Temple, there were 4 orderly long lines in the courtyard. There were guards from the ancient city maintaining order here. Everyone stood in front of the palace of the great emperor they believed in, waiting devoutly to pay their respects. There was no chaos or noise. They sure are harmonious. I thought they would fight. Wang Ying teased. Zhang Zizi sighed and said, after all, with the protection of the ancient city, most people don't dare to mess around. Other than that, many people believe that if they cause trouble here, they will be punished by the 4 emperors, causing their cultivation to stagnate. Is there such a saying? Wang Ying was curious. Actually, there isn't. It's just a psychological effect. The East Great Emperor personally clarified. The 4 emperors seemed to have a lot of followers, but basically, only a small portion of these followers were die-hard fans. Most of them actually acted according to their hearts. If the wishes they made were fulfilled, they would only pay respects to one emperor for a period of time. If the wishes they made were not fulfilled, they would immediately turn to other great emperors and become their fans. Even in the primordial era, this was a very realistic matter. Although it seemed to be disrespectful to the great emperors, there were many followers. As great emperors, they were not so narrow-minded as to specifically target a particular follower. Pray for the East Great Emperor. Bless the descendants of the Qin family and let their wishes come true. Words are law. As soon as they stepped through the threshold of the gate of the Divine Temple, everyone immediately heard a voice coming from the East Great Emperor's palace. A bald middle-aged man with a large string of prayer beads around his neck was prostrating on the ground in an exaggerated posture, kowtowing devoutly. Although everyone's posture was different and there was no particular set of rules, this man's exaggerated posture still attracted a lot of attention. Look, it's this weird wish again. This great emperor hasn't even achieved words are law, how can he guarantee that the descendants of the Qin family will be able to do so? The East Great Emperor ridiculed in the team voice spell. Wang Ling was silent for a very long time. Because when it came to the Qin family, whose words are law were law, Wang Ling's first impression was of Super Qin. He wasn't sure whether this middle-aged man in front of him was related to Super Qin or not. After all, this was already a long time ago. If Super Qin really was a descendant of the Qin family, that would be too much of a coincidence. Wang Ling was cursing in his heart when immediately after this middle-aged man surnamed Shen, a stout woman started to kowtow to the East Great Emperor's statue. Pray for the East Great Emperor. May the descendants of the Guo family have a wide network of people, have no worries about food or clothing, and be able to carry forward the spirit beast breeding business. This time, it wasn't just Wang Ling, even Lotus Sun was startled. Classmate Wang Ling, why do I feel that this senior sounds so much like Hero Guo? it can't be that coincidental, can it? Wang Zhen also felt that it was inconceivable. This was a long time ago. To be able to live from that period to the present day, how formidable was the power of the bloodline. Furthermore, the vast majority of the ancient ones had been imprisoned in the supreme corpse shroud painting by Dao ancestor Wang. Although it had already been ascertained that not all the ancient ones had been imprisoned inside, and that there was still a small number of them, and even those with royal blood, who were roaming outside, the probability of them surviving and leaving behind a fire seed was simply as low as dust. Wang Ling had never believed that there could be any coincidences in a situation where such a long time had passed, but he couldn't help but feel a little doubtful and suspicious of such a coincidence. In the current situation. Dad, let's go. What you're doing is useless. At that moment, a young man with a buzz cut ran over and helped the middle-aged man with the large prayer beads around his neck up. Don't be rude, this is the great emperor. He will hear our voices. The middle-aged man surnamed Chen had a pious expression on his face. But your words are law, that's too unrealistic. Isn't it the same as having your wishes come true? Unless the East Great Emperor himself appears in this temple, I don't believe he will fulfill my wish. Chen Ren sighed. East Great Emperor, Wang Ling, everyone else. Chapter 1874. As soon as Chen Ren said this, Wang Ling had no choice but to perk up and take a closer look at this youngster. If one didn't look carefully, this ancient version of Super Chen didn't seem very different from Super Chen. He had an exquisite buzz cut, regular facial features, dark skin, and just the right amount of muscles, as if he was synonymous with Super Chen. If one had to point out the difference, it would be the scar on the bridge of his nose and the fact that he was slightly taller than Super Chen. Ancient cultivators used heavenly materials and earthly treasures far more intensely than modern cultivators. Modern cultivators used heavenly materials and earthly treasures to refine pills that already had the standardized process of scientific cultivation, but ancient cultivators were different. They still used a more primitive method to refine elixirs, which was to throw the natural treasures they had collected into the furnace, and then leave it to fate. If they succeeded, the medicinal effects would be far more intense than those of modern cultivators, so ancient cultivators who had survived were much stronger than modern cultivators in terms of realm growth and development. Modern cultivators paid more attention to safety. Elixirs of the same standard wouldn't have any negative effects on the body, and the rest would be to use money to accumulate resources for cultivation. According to Zhang Zipei, there had been many ancient cultivators who had killed themselves by taking elixirs to achieve breakthroughs, and the number of them added up was enough to circle the earth several times. Chen Ren, I knew you'd be here too. While Wang Ling was staring at Chen Ren absent-mindedly, a loud voice rang out in the distance. A huge figure walked out of a palace hall and arrived at the entrance of East Great Emperor's main hall. This person was fat and had short hair. After greeting Chen Ren from afar, he helped up the chubby woman who was kowtowing on the ground like Chen Ren. Mother, it's useless for you to worship the emperor. I just don't want to cultivate. It's so nice to raise the spirit beast farm my family runs, the fat boy said. The chubby woman sighed. I know you don't like cultivation, so I didn't pray in that direction with East Great Emperor. I only hope that you can have more friends and connections. That way, at least you will have friends to take care of you in the future and you won't be bullied. We know you love raising spirit beasts, but you still have to cultivate. After all, your realm affects your lifespan. Your father and I don't want to see you die young. The chubby woman earnestly instructed him. In a trance, Wang Ling felt that this was an ill-fated relationship that couldn't be described in words. Even if he didn't believe it, the similarity between these two people and Super Chen's and Hero Guo's attributes was too high. Brother Guojia, I knew you'd come too. Like the modern cultivation world, these two had a very good relationship in the past, and Wang Ling felt as if he were a lifetime ago. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew that this was the ancient era, Wang Ling really would have thought that the people standing in front of him were Super Chen and Hero Guo themselves. I can't help it, because a lot of friends have come to pay their respects. Guojia, and as he laughed. As I say, I, Wang, he said, Chen as to say, I, Ling as I Ren and Ling, yes, we grew up together. It would be too fake if we were still so polite. Chen Ren laughed. The two of them put their arms around each other's shoulders and hugged each other. Wang, both, but as, the two, their, both, they, and to both their parents, and both, the parents, and both. Wang Ling actually wanted to get to know these two people, since he would be able to further determine whether they were related to Super Chen and Hero Gua in the future. But he was worried that he would disrupt the course of history if he probed them, so he resisted the urge. In the end, Wang Ling hadn't expected East Great Emperor to actually walk over on his own. Wang Ying, do you know them? East Great Emperor shook his head. No, it's just that Senior seems to want to get to know them. Wang Ying, don't, it'll affect the course of history. East Great Emperor, small details don't matter, as long as the big picture doesn't change. For example, if there's a showdown between great emperors here later, it'll affect a lot of people. In that case, no matter what you do, it won't affect the course of history. Wang Ling, Wang Ying, Lotus Sun, and the others instantly fell into a deep silence at these words. Because they could hear the meaning in his words. In the course of history, if there was an irreversible disaster, it indeed wouldn't matter what you did before the disaster, because the disaster was unchangeable, and everything after the disaster would be destroyed. This suddenly gave Wang Ling some misgivings. Because he knew what had happened to all the ancient ones. Most of them had been locked up in the Supreme Corpse painting by Tao ancestor Wang in the end. If this point in time was a great disaster, then in theory, no matter what they did now, it didn't seem like it would change the course of history. But this was just Wang Ling's idea. At the moment, he wasn't particularly clear about the structure of the eternal world, so it was always right to play it safe. Furthermore, the fact that all the ancient ones had been locked up in the Supreme Corpse painting wasn't actually a natural disaster, but a man-made one. Since it was a man-made one, the probability of triggering it might not be 100%. So the answer Wang Ling pondered on this premise was that everything they were doing in the diary now might be a way to pave the way for Tao ancestor Wang to lock up the ancient ones in the Supreme Corpse painting. It was too complicated. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed in his heart. It wasn't easy to sort out all these things, so he could only take it one step at a time. Brother, please wait, I think I've seen you somewhere before. Just as East Great Emperor was walking in the direction of the East Great Hall, Guojie's voice suddenly rang out, and he narrowed his eyes at him. Oh. Is that so? East Great Emperor smiled very kindly and warmly. You look very familiar. And judging from the style of your clothes, you should be from the East Territory, right? Only people from the East Territory are equipped with vermilion bird plume ornaments. I see that the vermilion bird embroidery on your robe is very exquisite, your identity must be unusual. Guojie frowned and guessed. You know a lot. East Great Emperor agreed. Yes, I heard it from my friends. I don't have much, just a lot of friends. Guojie smiled. Senior, please don't laugh. He's just like that, always acting familiar. At that moment, Chen Ren stepped forward and cupped his fists respectfully. You're a polite child. East Great Emperor nodded in satisfaction. Senior's bearing is extraordinary, and there are other seniors at your side, so you must be a member of the royal family from the East Territory. At that moment, Chen Ren also voiced his opinion. Also, you must be a fan of East Great Emperor. East Great Emperor. Why do you think so? Isn't Senior's attire paying tribute to East Great Emperor? Does Senior dare say that he is East Great Emperor himself? Chen Ren couldn't stop laughing. Even if he is, that's too weird. Who would come to pay their respects, don't you think? East Great Emperor, Lotus Sun, Wang Ling, everyone else, Wang Ling realized. Sure enough, the Chen family was very dangerous, it had been very dangerous since ancient times. Chapter 1875. There was no need for Wang Ling to say more about the danger Qin Ren was in. East Great Emperor could sense it. It turned out that there really were people like this in this world who could unintentionally reveal the truth. The point was that they didn't have much awareness of what they were saying. This was too frightening. In some sense, this kind of talent had already surpassed that of the royal family, which was amazing. They didn't rely on the power of their bloodline at all, and were simply crushed by their talent. When it came to bloodlines, this was what East Great Emperor found most amazing. Senior Wang. These two people, especially the one called Qin Ren, do you know all of their descendants? East Great Emperor asked weakly in the team voice communication technique. There are indeed two descendants who look very much like them, and even have the same surname. But at the moment, I can't tell if the two people I know are their descendants. After a moment of silence, Wang Ying finally answered truthfully. This amazed East Great Emperor even more, and he was utterly shocked. These two people in front of him couldn't even be considered members of the royal family. At most, they were nobles in a territory, the kind of rich people who didn't have to worry about food and clothing, but their cultivation talents were inferior to the royal family. If Guo Jia and Qin Ren really were the ancestors of Hero Guo and Super Qin, it could be said that the luck of these two clans was simply heaven-defying. They clearly weren't ancient beings with royal blood, but they were able to leave behind descendants who could transcend time and reach the modern cultivation world. What kind of terrible luck did this clan have? Even many members of the royal family didn't have this kind of luck. After all, Dao ancestor Wang had gone crazy and locked up all the ancient beings, the emperor, the royal family, the rogue cultivators and ordinary people among the ancient beings, in the same world in the painting. He hadn't let a single one of them off. As for the rest, probably only a few tenths of a percent of the population had survived, and it was definitely easier for those with royal blood to escape the devil's clutches. Since they were strong enough, they might have the means to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. Given that they weren't members of the royal family and didn't have enough strength, there were pitifully few ordinary people who could openly slip away. In Wang Ling's eyes, this probability of escaping was already no different from winning the lottery. All in all, this trip to the temple was a pleasant surprise for Wang Ling, and could also be considered a kind of scare. This feeling of meeting an old friend in a foreign land was incredibly magical. Then the question was, since Super Chen's and Hero Guo's ancestors had appeared, would he also run into his immemorial self? Initially, they had come to the temple to wait for Madame Shanxiu's appointment. He hadn't expected that instead of Madame Shanxiu, they would trigger some strange plot. Brother, you look very familiar. Do you want to exchange a spiritual mark? Guo Jia, who was already very familiar with him, asked. He took out a piece of jade with an expectant look. The eternal world did not have such modern equipment, let alone the internet. Cultivators still used primitive methods to communicate with each other, such as leaving spiritual energy imprints. Every cultivator had their own special spiritual energy, so as long as they left a spiritual energy imprint on each other, they could communicate directly through the jade in the future, which was equivalent to adding a contact person. Of course. The East Great Emperor smiled and directly took out his jade stone. Zhang Ziqin was horrified. This wasn't an ordinary spiritual energy imprint. Since it had been given by the East Great Emperor, it was naturally his imprint. The East Great Emperor had actually given something that so many people yearned for but couldn't get. This time, Wang Ling completely understood that this East Great Emperor was someone who liked to stir up trouble and didn't mind causing trouble. After Guo Jia's exchange, Qin Ren next to him also did the same. In this way, Guo Jia and Qin Ren could be considered to have made a new friend. So far, they didn't know the real background of this friend, and could only vaguely sense that he was a member of the Eastern Territories royal family. It's embarrassing to ask for a spiritual energy mark on our first meeting. How about we treat you to a meal, senior? Hero Guo said to East Great Emperor as he looked at Qin Ren, and the two of them smiled at each other. I'm afraid not. I'm waiting for someone. He wants to talk to me, East Great Emperor replied. Who? Hero Guo was curious. Mei Yunhai. Madame Shan Xiu's direct disciple. Madame Shanxiu will also be here later, East Great Emperor said. Oh. It's them. To East Great Emperor's surprise, this Guojie's network was broader than he had imagined, and he even knew Mei Yunhai and Madame Shanxiu. You know them? More than that, I'm very familiar with them. Guojie said. I met Mei Yunhai when we went to the secret land together. Of course, it was mainly him who took me along, and I provided spirit beasts for support along the way, all kinds of spirit beasts for transportation, spirit beasts to assist in attacks, and spirit beasts to store food and so on. Spirit beasts to store food, everyone blushed with shame when they heard this. So, he was so hungry that he directly ate spirit beasts as meat? That was too cruel. Guojie put his hands on his hips and said with the expression of a diviner, and let me tell you, I even know why Mei Yunhai is looking for you. Shouldn't it be Madame Shanxiu looking for me? Why Mei Yunhai? East Great Emperor asked. Madame Shanxiu is just here to keep watch, and was afraid that Senior wouldn't agree. Guojie replied, Senior, you should know that Mei Yunhai is Madame Shanxiu's only true disciple. But in fact, Mei Yunhai has a younger sister who isn't his biological sister. She and Mei Yunhai ran to become Madame Shanxiu's true disciple, but unfortunately, Madame Shanxiu didn't choose her. Why are you telling my master this? Zhang Zizi raised his eyebrows and asked. I know that Senior is extraordinary, and is a member of the East Territories royal family. Since she is a member of the East Territories royal family, she must have a connection with East Great Emperor. Guojie said, Senior, can't you see that Madame Shanxiu's main purpose for looking for you, is to send Mei Yunhai's younger sister to the East Territories imperial palace to cultivate? Everyone. Hearing this, Wang Ling suddenly felt like he had been cheated. What happened to discussing the secrets of the Book of Nine Realms? Why was it suddenly about finding a partner for East Great Emperor's harem? This woman, Zhang Zizi's lips trembled, and he was about to scream. At that moment, there was a commotion inside the temple. At the door, several familiar figures appeared, and because of their astonishing fame in the eternal world, they attracted the attention of the surrounding onlookers. It was Madame Shanxiu, who had come with her true disciple, Mei Yunhai, and a young girl who looked natural and unrestrained. She was wearing a long aqua blue dress with a white silk chiffon over it. The pearl belt around her waist was particularly eye-catching, and her silky black hair hung down to her waist. Her crescent eyebrows and starry eyes made her look very beautiful, snow-white skin. The girl's steps were light and full of confidence, which gave Wang Ling a very familiar feeling. Then, she walked up to East Great Emperor in 2 or 3 steps. Before Madame Shanxiu and Mei Yunhai could introduce themselves, she smiled and introduced herself. Hello, Senior. My name is Sun Fu, Mei Yunhai's adopted sister. An inner sect disciple of Immortal Mountain Sect. When this sweet voice rang in their ears, Wang Ling was dumbfounded. Wang Ling was stupefied, and so was Lotus Sunday. Chapter 1876. These days, there were many members of the royal family who wanted to send their children to the imperial palace to gain experience. However, this was the first time that the East Emperor had seen someone who was obviously not very familiar with the imperial palace. After this incident, even the East Emperor himself was a little confused because he found that the current direction of the script had deviated a little from the track. And this was something that he did not write in his diary. However, the East Emperor still chose to deal with it calmly. As he said before, as long as the major events did not change, these trivial matters would not affect the real process of history. Over the years, he had also approved many new people to enter the imperial palace to cultivate. In the eyes of others, it was a big matter, but in the eyes of the East Emperor, it was really just a trivial matter. The East Emperor did not want to expose his identity, so he respectfully bowed to Madame Shanxiu in front of him. Greetings, Madam. You don't have to be so polite, sir. It is not convenient to talk here. There is a spring orchid house next to the temple. I think it is more suitable to talk there. Madame Shanxiu narrowed her eyes and revealed a kind smile. The two faced each other and communicated through the team telepathy technique. So, madam, you led me here just to confirm whether I am related to the East Emperor? The East Emperor laughed. Indeed, there is a reason. Madame Shanxiu nodded slightly. The Central Region Temple worshipped 4 emperors at the same time. Under normal circumstances, after entering the temple, the believers would directly walk to the palace of the great emperor they believed in. Madame Shanxiu also probed the identity of the East Emperor. Sorry, madam, I can't help you with this matter. However, to Madame Shanxiu's surprise, the East Emperor politely bowed and quickly declined her invitation. As far as I know, this year's Imperial Palace of the East Emperor has already been selected. Moreover, the East Emperor Palace has just experienced a war, and many of the palaces have been destroyed. It can be said that there are many things to do. So before it is completely restored, there will be no new plans to accept new people. He chose to directly refuse, and the reason was almost watertight, leaving Madame Shanxiu speechless for a while. From the East Great Emperor's point of view, a direct rejection was the best way to avoid any trouble. Moreover, it was impossible for him to leave under such circumstances. Because his purpose of coming to the temple was actually to wait for the flustered and exasperated King Tiankuan to appear. As for inquiring about the secret of the Book of 9 Realms, it was just a matter of convenience. It was just that the East Great Emperor did not expect that Madame Shanxiu would actually use this secret as bait to lure him to the temple to test him. Her actions had already caused the Great East Emperor to be extremely dissatisfied. Thus, even without the aforementioned excuses, he would not have accepted this lady called Sun Fu. Although he had already rejected Madame Shanxiu's offer, the East Great Emperor still tried his best to speak to Sun Fu in a calm tone. This young lady is extraordinarily talented. I think she will be in high demand wherever she goes. You don't have to choose the East Imperial Palace. Now that the East Imperial Palace is in chaos, perhaps it is better for you to find another path. The Great East Emperor wasn't being courteous when he said that he was extremely talented. Sun Fu's cultivation talent was indeed very good. At such a young age, she had already reached the divine transformation stage, which was very rare. If she could be cultivated with more resources, it would not be difficult for her to enter the ancestor realm in the future. Moreover, the East Great Emperor could see that Sun Fu had suffered a lot. Although she was young, she was a ruthless character. There was a faint aura of thunder on her body, which proved that she had just resisted the heavenly tribulation not long ago. Moreover, without the assistance of outsiders, she had resisted the heavenly tribulation with her own strength. This was not something that ordinary people could do with their courage. However, after listening to the East Great Emperor's words, Sun Fu's willowy eyebrows slightly furrowed. It was obvious that she was a little surprised by such a refusal. She was not chosen by Madame Shanxiu as a true disciple not because her talent was inferior to Mei Yunhai's. It was because Madame Shanxiu felt that with her talent, it would be a waste to stay in the Immortal Mountain sect. It would be better to be sent to the Imperial Palace with the other royal children to gain experience. She originally thought that an outstanding young lady like herself would not be rejected if she could find a way to enter the Imperial Palace. But the man in front of her didn't have the slightest interest in her at all. On one hand, he said that she was a fragrant cake that everyone would fight over, but on the other hand, he refused her invitation and told her to find another way out. Sun Fu felt that this was completely illogical. Senior, are you testing my sincerity? After thinking for a while, Sun Fu came up with an answer, and she said telepathically to the East Great Emperor, I understand. It's not easy to join the Imperial Palace. If you're not careful, you might sneak into other big region spies. East Great Emperor, Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, but Senior, please rest assured, I'm not that kind of person. I grew up without parents. It was Brother Yunhai who picked me up and brought me back to the Immortal Mountain sect to cultivate under Madame Shanxiu. Given Madame's reputation in the cultivation world, Senior should at least give me this little bit of trust, right? Sun Fu bowed again and said respectfully, "No matter what Senior thinks of me, it is my wish to join the East Imperial Palace. I am only willing to join the East Imperial Palace. There are many things waiting to be done in the East Imperial Palace, and we need manpower. My daughter, Sun Fu, can definitely help." Hearing this, Wang Ling and Lotus Sun were stunned. This time, they couldn't explain at all what was going on with this identical ability to fill in the blanks. This was simply a modern Lotus Sun's eternal replica. East Great Emperor sighed deeply when he heard this. He hadn't expected Sun Fu to be so determined. It would be very difficult to drive her away now. But as long as it didn't affect the overall situation, East Great Emperor thought that it wouldn't hurt to keep her here. Very quickly, East Great Emperor changed his mind. He looked at Madame Shan Xiu, Mei Yunhai and Sun Fu and said, "How about this, Madam? This Miss Sun Fu can stay with me for the time being. I can also take her to the East Imperial Palace to see the Emperor for a recommendation. But I still have important matters to attend to in the Central Territory, so I won't make a move so quickly. During this period of time, if Miss Sun Fu can behave herself and not cause trouble for me, then I'm still willing to help her." Madame Shan Xiu immediately beamed with joy. "Then I'll have to trouble you, sir. Of course, since you can help lead the way, I will naturally be grateful to you. I believe that you are also very curious about the secret of the Book of Nine Realms." East Great Emperor's eyes lit up at this. He hadn't expected Madame Shan Xiu to actually know something, and wasn't deceiving him. Just as he was about to ask, Madame Shan Xiu, who was holding her walking stick, suddenly turned her ear as if she had sensed danger, and focused her attention somewhere in the air. Madame Shan Xiu smiled. "But it seems that I can only tell you about this after you've resolved the trouble in front of you." It was a powerful and awe-inspiring killing intent that swept across the sky with an insufferably mighty and domineering air. "Old thief from room 1. How dare you steal this king's Book of Nine Realms? This king is coming for you." Before he arrived, his voice had already arrived. Then, this overwhelming pressure suddenly descended. With the entire temple as the center, the ground immediately shook violently. No one had expected this King Tianquan to be so overbearing as to directly seek revenge in front of the statues of the 4 emperors in this temple of the central region. Chapter 1877. On the central trade planet, King Tianquan was actually very powerful. Just his might alone caused black clouds to cover the sky above the temple. A mysterious power completely covered the entire sky above the temple, and not a single ray of light could penetrate through. As for the 2 snake women who followed him earlier, they were very far away, as if they were afraid that they would be implicated. Not only did they hide far away, but they also set up several layers of spiritual shields around themselves. They didn't participate in the battle, but just incited King Tianquan to attack from the rear. "Go, King! Get rid of the villain in room 1. Take back the Book of Nine Realms. There's a statue of the Great West Emperor in the temple, and he's watching it." When Snake Woman number 2 heard this, she also egged him on, "Your Highness, hurry up. These people are mediocre, and they definitely can't beat you. You've been on the battlefield for a long time, so how can you be afraid of them?" King Tianquan sneered. He stood proudly in the void, full of vigor, as if he didn't care about the people below him. At this moment, the believers in the temple were either fleeing or scattering. King Tianquan watched them flee in all directions, and he didn't stop them. His target was very obvious. He was targeting the Great East Emperor's group. As for the other believers in the temple, they weren't his target, and he wasn't interested in them. However, this was the central trade planet, and very few people dared to directly attack here. As the Alliance army, the Central Galaxy's ancient city guards couldn't just stand by and watch. Immediately, dozens of guards appeared on the other side of the sky on their spiritual swords like meteors. When they saw that the person standing there was King Tianquan, the expressions on everyone's faces changed. This was the representative of the Great Western Emperor, and his battle prowess was extraordinary. Now that he had chosen to fight here, the guards of the ancient city instantly became very passive. King, this is not the place to attack. A captain of the ancient city guards stood up and talked to King Tiankuan with a head full of cold sweat. He was under a lot of pressure, and his heart trembled. This King Tiankuan was indeed the representative of the Great West Emperor, a big shot who had been on the battlefield for a long time. Just by standing in front of him, he could feel the terrifying pressure. Seeing King Tiankuan remain silent, his Adam's apple involuntarily rolled, and then he said, "If King Tiankuan can use the core world to fight, we will leave immediately." This was the ancient city guards' way of advancing by retreating. It was their duty to mediate the conflicts and wars in the central galaxy. However, the person they were facing was King Tiankuan, an extremely troublesome character. The ancient city guards knew that they were powerless to stop him, so they could only take a step back and hope that King Tiankuan could use his inner world to fight. However, King Tiankuan couldn't care less about this. He didn't care about these ancient city guards at all. Then wouldn't my inner world be a mess? This king will fight here. Don't worry, I won't cause any trouble for you. This king knows his limits and won't cause too much damage to this place. When the guards of the ancient city heard this, they couldn't help but look at each other. They wanted to say something but hesitated. Even with King Tiankuan's guarantee, most of them were still extremely hesitant. A battle between deity transformation realm experts was a weapon of destruction, let alone a progenitor like King Tiankuan. If a progenitor went all out, then it wouldn't just be an apocalyptic battle. Instead, it would be a proper planetary war. It doesn't matter, everyone. Since King Tiankuan wants to fight with me, I naturally have no reason to refuse. Don't worry, I won't let King Tiankuan wreak havoc here. At this moment, the Great East Emperor smiled kindly and said, "If it is damaged, with the divine elephant of the Great West Emperor here, you can ask the Great West Emperor for the cost of the repair. I believe that the Great West Emperor is wise and will never renege on the debt." At this moment, a powerful surge of spiritual energy rushed out from the East Emperor's body like a flame. This was just the most common fire elemental spell, not the vermilion bird divine ability, but it was already so terrifying. This was because the East Emperor didn't want to directly reveal his true identity, so he deliberately hid it. He was currently playing the role of a member of the royal family from the East Domain. Therefore, it wasn't strange for him to have a fire element spell on him. King Tiankuan had already noticed that the guest in room 1 wasn't an ordinary person, but the intensity of this spirit power still made his eyes twitch slightly. The moment their auras collided, the scene immediately became irreconcilable. The ancient city guards in the sky couldn't withstand this collision of auras at all, and were extremely embarrassed to be caught in the middle. They had no choice but to descend from the sky and take charge of dispersing the crowd and building a barrier. "Madame Shan Xiu, it's very dangerous here." An ancient city guard approached Madame Shan Xiu and tried to take her away. However, Madame Shan Xiu just smiled slightly. "It's fine, I'm here." She then looked at Sun Fu, Chen Ren, and Guo Jia next to her. "These 3 juniors will also be under my protection. Nothing will happen to them. Drive away the other independent cultivators first, their safety is more important." Madame Shan Xiu's expression was unexpectedly calm and composed, and Lotus Sun, Zhang Zipei, and Wang Zhen were all a little dazed by her. They were certain that Madame Shan Xiu wasn't from the modern era, but her calm attitude, as if she already knew Wang Ling's identity, made them feel very puzzled. Boom! King Tiankuan pressed his palm forward, and the sound of the great Tao instantly boomed. He moved extremely quickly like a flood dragon exploring the sea, and the blazing light it produced shattered the surrounding space. Dark purple lightning flashed in an incomparably terrifying manner. This was the Western region's Romance of the Dragon and Snake, divine power, which King Tiankuan had already cultivated to the 10th level. His palm moved at a terrifying speed, like a snake, a dragon, and a flood dragon, twisting together in an earth-shattering manner. Together with the blazing light emitted by East Great Emperor, it formed a dazzling yin and yang pattern. One yin and one yang, One was like a demon god descending to the world, and the other was like a golden crow flying in the sky. Hiding in East Great Emperor's body, Wang Ling secretly observed everything. He hadn't directly assisted East Great Emperor in his attack, and everything he was seeing now was East Great Emperor's own strength. It could only be said that East Great Emperor was indeed an expert with the bearing of a great emperor. He just stood where he was with his hands behind his back, and was unusually steady. Just as the great East Emperor had said before, he was only facing a duke. How could a mere duke make him, a great emperor, feel fear? So, standing where he was, he just wrapped his palm in fire, then clenched his fist and punched out at King Tiankun in front of him. Boom! A huge and blazing light burst forth from East Great Emperor's fist and shot straight at King Tiankun's body like a fire dragon. East Great Emperor's blow could be said to be unstoppable. After it exploded with astonishing power, it shot into the sky and formed an astonishing pillar of fire that the naked eye couldn't see. What happened next was completely out of everyone's expectations. Everyone, including the East Great Emperor himself, was astonished. Because East Great Emperor hadn't expected this at all. His punch, to actually directly kill King Tiankun. And this wasn't written in the diary at all. Chapter 1878. With just one punch, King Tiankun had been directly reduced to ashes. East Great Emperor was instantly stupefied. This wasn't what he wanted to see, because it wasn't part of the diary's plot at all. According to the diary's plot, he would have only severely injured King Tiankun, and wouldn't have been reduced to ashes like this. What's going on? Why did he just die? Wang Ying asked, but his expression was just as calm as Wang Ling's. Coincidentally, both of them felt that things were getting interesting. Wang Ling had initially thought that since this journey of eternity had been planned, there would definitely be some hiccups, and it wouldn't go as smoothly as the diary had planned. At first, he had thought that East Great Emperor was in cahoots with the person who had instructed him to write the diary, so he had hidden the truth and refused to reveal his identity. But looking at the current outcome, it was clear that East Great Emperor had no idea that the diary's plot had been changed, and was even a little stupefied. No, I didn't want to kill him at all. Senior Wang didn't help me. The strength of my punch just now shouldn't have been enough to kill him at all. In the party voice chat, the East Great Arch was also in disbelief. From the looks of it, it's very likely that we were all set up together, Lotus Sun added at this moment. According to the original diary's plot, King Tiankun had only been severely injured, and even West Great Emperor had only suffered a loss in silence. After all, this was a central region galaxy, a place with strict order. King Tiankun had directly used the method of killing and robbing, and then he had been severely injured by the East Great Arch. No matter where you looked at it, the East Great Arch was in the right. But now that King Tiankun was dead, it wasn't just an ordinary conflict, but a diplomatic issue between the two territories. The person who had died was King Tiankun, the most famous lord in the Western Territory. He was also the great general who guarded the Western Territory. He was the representative of West Great Emperor, and his overall strength was second only to West Great Emperor. But such a person had been killed with one punch. This was something that no one had expected. At that moment, the streets of the ancient city began to be filled with commotion. This was because King Heavenly Kun had suddenly disappeared under that punch. No one had realized that King Heavenly Kun had been killed. They felt that King Heavenly Kun had used some sort of method to escape. For a moment, many people were discussing. Only the East Great Sovereign's side clearly knew that King Tiankun had died a thorough death. Not even his ashes were left behind. Just as they were at a loss as to what to do, the two serpent woman attendants who had been following King Tiankun suddenly walked over. The two snake women acted as if they were facing a great enemy. Snake woman number 1 stared at the great East Emperor and said, You actually used such a despicable method. If it wasn't for my prince's quick escape, I'm afraid he would have been severely injured by your hands. East Great Emperor, seeing this, Snake Woman number 2 quickly echoed, yeah, just you wait. Once my Wang Ye regains his strength, he will definitely find you for revenge. The two of them cursed loudly, as if they were afraid that the people around them wouldn't be able to hear them. It wasn't until then that the people around them understood the truth of the matter. Oh, it turned out that this King Heavenly Kun had slipped away. He even said that he was the representative of the Great West Emperor. He had started a fight, but in the end, he had run away. How cowardly. For a moment, many people on the street were talking about this. For a moment, the area around the temple became very chaotic. Helpless, everyone could only find a place to hold a meeting and then come up with a plan. The historical trajectory in the diary had now been disrupted. King Heavenly Kun's death was a key plot point, and no one knew what would happen next. As for those two snake women, who were singing the same tune as if they were performing a crosstalk, Wang Ling was basically convinced that these two snake women were on their side. Otherwise, they would never have instigated a war between King Heavenly King and the East Great Emperor. Another very important point was that they had actually helped the East Great Emperor to temporarily smooth things over. If it hadn't been for these two snake women, perhaps everyone would have known that something had happened to King Heavenly Kun. But both Wang Ling and the East Great Emperor were well aware that this was just a stopgap measure. After all, the fight had taken place in front of the temple and in front of the divine elephants of the other three great emperors. Sooner or later, the truth couldn't be wrapped up, and it was only a matter of time before it was discovered. Madame Shanxiu had mentioned Chunlan House earlier, so the East Great Emperor had immediately asked Zhang Zizi to steal money to reserve the entire building. The East Great Emperor, Wang Ling, Wang Ying, the Holy Girl of Holy Stone Sect, Wang Zhen, and the Jiaoyang Goddess, Lotus Sun, who had already changed her name to Xia Xinyan, sat in a private room. On the other side, Li Ren, Zhang Zizi, sat in another private room with the Wangu trio, Chen Ren, Guo Jia, Sun Fu, and Madame Shanxiu. As for Mei Yunhai, he had been used as a tool to guard the door of the restaurant. After waiting for a while, Wang Ling's powerful spiritual senses quickly picked up news of the two snake women under King Heavenly Kun. He had already informed Mei Yunhai, so when he saw the two snake women arrive, Mei Yunhai didn't stop them and directly let them in. After the two entered, they immediately headed for the East Great Emperor's house. The expressions on their faces were very nervous and perturbed, as if they had mustered up a lot of courage to come here. "Excuse me, you are..." One of the snake women opened her mouth and straightforwardly confirmed Wang Ling's identity. It was very obvious that these two snake women had received the secret signal that Wang Ling had sent out at the auction house by auctioning off that non-existent divine beast hair. But before snake woman number 1 could speak, Wang Ying immediately interjected, "That's right, I am Wang Ying." After saying this, the two snake women looked at each other. They were very quick-witted, and when they saw Wang Ying directly interject, they immediately understood that Wang Ling and Wang Ying were probably in the same body, and he was definitely still hiding his identity. Wang Ying had come forward because he didn't want to be exposed. "Sure enough, it's you, Senior Wang." After understanding everything, Snake Woman number 1 immediately sighed with emotion, and then revealed her identity. "I am Lu Qingyi." Because they had already completely broken away from history, there was no harm in directly revealing their identities without using the team telepathy spell. She then turned her gaze to Xia Xinyan with a gentle expression. "This should be my good disciple, Rongrong, right?" Hearing this, Lotus Sun immediately burst out laughing. Shifu, how did you know?" "In any case, I was your cheap Shifu, your little eyes are too easy to read." Saying this, Lu Qingyi, who was playing Snake Woman number 1, turned her gaze to the Holy Stone Church Holy Girl. Just as everyone thought that Lu Qingyi would guess Wang Zhen's identity, to everyone's surprise, Lu Qingyi directly raised her hand and slapped him. "Pa!" There was a crisp sound, and Wang Zhen was a little dazed. "What are you doing?" With tears in her eyes, Lu Qingyi instantly went over and hugged him. "Idiot! Do you know how worried I was about you?" Wang Zhen was dazed, and just as he was about to hug Lu Qingyi, blood started to ooze from the corner of his mouth. Lu Qingyi was startled. "What's going on? I just lightly slapped him. East Great Emperor swallowed the dog food in his mouth, then wiped the sweat off his cheeks. This brother Wang Zhen, the body he's attached to is already pregnant. Miss Lu's palm strike just now should have affected his fetus. Lu Qingyi. Chapter 1879. Faced with the female version of Wang Zhen who was pregnant with Tuan Zi, Lu Qingyi's expression was extremely complicated. Although having a child had been part of her and Wang Zhen's plans after they fell in love, she hadn't expected it to be so early. Furthermore, the one who was pregnant wasn't her, but Wang Zhen himself. The most important thing now is to find a way to go back. Otherwise, if I stay here for too long, I'll really have to give birth. Wang Zhen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took a few deep breaths to stabilize the baby, but the mask of pain on his face was still very obvious. He had a feeling that something would happen to this child soon. If that really happened, it wouldn't be a joke. Wang Zhen couldn't imagine that a man like him would have to experience the pain of childbirth. According to the original diary trajectory, as long as the Four Emperors' assembly was successfully completed, they would be able to directly return to the modern world. But now that the diary trajectory had been disrupted, the original ending of the Four Emperors' assembly would also change, and many other complicated trajectories might even emerge. Even if the Four Emperors' assembly went on smoothly, whether they could go back after completing their mission would be a problem. It was precisely because of this child in his belly that Wang Zhen had been focusing almost all his attention on it these days, and had no time to think about anything else. No matter how beautiful this holy girl of Holy Stone Church was, Wang Zhen wasn't in the mood to admire her at all, let alone have any lewd thoughts about this body. Of course, this was also thanks to Lu Qingyi's strict discipline. Although the two of them had transmigrated into different people's bodies, they still knew each other very well. At the same time, Lu Qingyi had full trust in Wang Zhen and felt that he would never do anything to let her down. Ah, that's great. Lotus Sun couldn't help but feel envious, even though she knew very well that this wasn't the time to be envious. As Wang Ling had expected, these two snake women were on their side, and had both transmigrated from the modern world. Snake Woman number 1, Lu Qingyi, had already revealed her identity, but at that moment, Snake Woman number 2 suddenly laughed and looked at Lotus Sunday. Since you've guessed Sister Qingyi's identity, can you guess mine? Lotus Sun replied with a smile, you're Taoist priest Yu Yueqing, right? Seeing that her identity had been revealed, Yu Yueqing looked like she was asking for trouble. Ah, I clearly haven't known you for long, so how do you know me so well? You were able to guess my identity immediately. Lotus Sun smiled. Taoist Yu has an elegant temperament. Even if you enter this snake woman's body, this aspect won't change easily, right? Of course, the most important thing is. Taoist priest Yu, can you put down the feather duster in your hand? Yu Yueqing smiled awkwardly. She didn't expect the feather duster in her hand to betray her. She had the habit of shaking off the dust when she was thinking about things. This was also an occupational disease that she had developed over the years as a Taoist. However, in order to not expose her identity as the Lamia, she had to endure these days. But now that the trajectory of the script was completely messed up, she could finally release her nature. However, he couldn't find a suitable flying duster for the time being, so he could only use the feather duster he found in the restaurant as a replacement. It was this habitual movement that Lotus Sun sensed something was off. Then, Wang Ying quickly summarized the current situation to Lu Qingyi and Yu Yueqing telepathically. At this point, everyone fell into deep thought again. Getting down to business, the East Great Emperor sighed. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. According to the previous script, King Tianquan shouldn't have been killed by me. There's clearly a third party involved. Lu Qingyi analyzed and looked at the East Great Emperor. And I think that if Senior really isn't hiding anything from us, there's only one possibility left. Now that things have come to this Emperor indeed has nothing to hide. Senior Wang is in my body, and he witnesses everything. This Emperor is counting on Senior Wang to show off for me at the Four Emperors' Assembly. Who would have thought something like this would happen? The East Great Emperor was very anxious, and didn't seem to be hiding anything at all. Then it's actually very obvious that there's a third party who also knows about this diary. Furthermore, they intend to deliberately destroy the trajectory of the diary to achieve their own ulterior motives. At that moment, Lu Qingyi stared straight at the East Great Emperor. Senior, I'll ask you again. Are you sure you're not lying? Do you really not know anything about this mysterious senior one? The East Great Emperor felt a little awkward when he looked at Lu Qingyi like this. She was clearly a girl with a much lower realm than him, but for some reason, the East Great Emperor felt like he was shorter than Lu Qingyi. This was a powerful interrogation technique with the gaze, and Wang Zhen had the most right to speak about it. Ever since Wang Zhen and Lu Qingyi got together, Lu Qingyi had been particularly strict with Wang Zhen's interactions with other members of the opposite sex, and would often use this kind of gaze to interrogate him. Thus, it was useless to lie under Lu Qingyi's gaze. Lu Qingyi would keenly pick up on the slightest hint of something amiss. Thus, after Lu Qingyi stared into the East Great Emperor's eyes for a few minutes, she suddenly withdrew her gaze and rubbed her chin doubtfully. From what I can see, the East Great Emperor isn't lying. He really doesn't know anything about the unexpected situation that's happening, or about this mysterious senior one. So first of all, we have to figure out what this third party is planning by disrupting the diary's original trajectory. At that moment, Wang Ying's voice sounded. Borrowing the East Great Emperor's body, he snapped his fingers, and a circle of light suddenly appeared in the air in front of him. Inside the circle was the scene of Zhang Zidong talking to Madame Shanxiu and the others in another room. At that moment, Zhang Zidong and Madame Shanxiu were testing each other out, and they happened to ask about the key topic of the Book of Nine Realms. Madame said that as a reward for my master, she would reveal a secret about the Book of Nine Realms. Zhang Zidong asked, Madame said that as a reward for my master, she would reveal a secret about the Book of Nine Realms. This Madame's words naturally count. Yes, Madame. Madame Shanxiu smiled amiably, and then gave Sun Fu a look. Take it out. Yes, Madame. Sun Fu nodded obediently, and then took out a familiar scroll from a storage ring. This is, Zhang Zidong and the others in the other room were instantly stunned. It's as you can see. Madame Shanxiu narrowed her eyes and said mysteriously, this is the other Book of Nine Realms. It's indeed an authentic copy from Dao Ancestor Wang. Then the one we got, it's also authentic, Madame Shanxiu said. There were originally two Books of Nine Realms. One was the Yang Scroll, and the other was the Yin Scroll. Chapter 1880. There were actually two Books of Nine Realms in this cultivation world at the same time, whether it was Zhang Zipei, who was watching from the front, or Wang Ling and the others who were watching from the next room, they were all slightly stunned. Dao Ancestor Wang designed two books at the beginning? Zhang Zipei asked. There was indeed only one book at the beginning. Madame Shanxiu frowned and said, do you remember the Life and All Things bowl that was sold at the beginning of the auction? It's a chaos magic treasure that can replicate any object. So it's that bowl. No, that bowl isn't that strong. It's one thing to replicate elixirs and talismans, but how can it replicate the Book of Nine Realms as well? Zhang Zipei was puzzled. It's a magic treasure that has the same function as that bowl. As far as I know, this magic treasure should be an object from the Outer God Palace, and has something to do with the old world. Her words once again stunned everyone present. Perhaps not many modern cultivators knew or came into contact with the matters of the old world, but among the ancient cultivators, this was a common topic. Humans were creatures full of curiosity. They would never stop exploring and tracing back to past civilizations. It was a never-ending cycle. In the heyday of the Old World, the rulers of the Old World led by the Outer Gods would certainly trace the origin of the universe. Although they were a magnificent race in the history of the universe, Wang Ling was certain that they absolutely weren't the origin of the universe. In the vast universe, there were all kinds of mysterious species. The old world, the world of the dragon clan, and the world of cultivators created by humans were nothing more than a drop in the ocean of the vast universe. Madam, is the Book of Nine Realms the Yin Scroll or the Yang Scroll? Zhang Zipei was a little stupefied as he opened his eyes and asked. It's the Yin Scroll. Madame Shan Xiu said, if you sense it carefully with your spiritual senses, you should be able to sense that it's surrounded by some extraordinary energy that doesn't belong to cultivators. But I still don't understand why that person attacked King Tiankuan. Zhang Zipei frowned. Because the Yin Scroll of the Book of Nine Realms originally belonged to King Tiankuan. Ah. Also, King Tiankuan entrusted that master thief called Zhang Zipei to give it to me. Ah. What's wrong, brother? Why are you so surprised? Zhang Zizi wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and tried to regain his composure. At the same time, he began to recall the events that had happened a long time ago. He vaguely seemed to remember this matter, but if Madame Shan Xiu did not mention it at this moment, he was afraid that he would never remember it in his lifetime. Do you still remember when Zhang Zi stole the mixed immortal stone in front of everyone at the auction? That was when King Tiankuan's commission began. Madame Shan Xiu said, therefore, the Chaos Immortal Stone is just a bait. King Tiankuan had planned to hand it over from the start, as it was a reward for Zhang Zidua. And their real purpose is to transfer the Yin volume of the Book of the Nine Realms to me. At this point, the surrounding people were all stunned. No one would have thought that the truth would be like this. On the surface, King Tiankuan had attended the auction in such a dignified manner, guarded the Chaos Immortal Stone, and threatened to capture Zhang Zipei. All of this had been done in order to move the Book of Nine Realms out. At this moment, Qin Ren could not help but speak up, so, King Tiankuan's real purpose is to ask Madame to protect the Yin volume of the Book of the Nine Realms, and he also knows that he has been targeted from the beginning? Madame Shan Xiu seemed a little surprised by Qin Ren's accurate guess. After a moment of daze, she nodded. Brother Qin Ren is right, but why did he fight with the gentleman in room 1 for the Yang volume at the auction? Sun Fu asked. Because under normal circumstances, it is impossible for a copied item to surpass the original. But because this Yin volume is enhanced by the power of the Great Old World, it is surrounded by a mysterious force. This way, the situation is different from what we imagined. Madame Shan Xiu explained in detail, compared to the Yang volume, the Yin volume has a more terrifying power. Not only can you inherit Dao ancestor Wang's legacy, but you can also obtain the power of the Great Old World. According to what this old woman knows, this copy of the Yin scroll has no restrictions. No matter who opens it, they can see the words inside. Could this be the Great Old World's recovery plan? Zhang Zi made a bold guess. That's right. This recovery plan is very dangerous. King Tiankuan clearly guessed this, which is why he started to set it up. Madame Shan Xiu said, in the end, this Yin scroll is only a copy. As long as King Tiankuan can successfully obtain the Yang scroll, he can offset part of the Yin scroll's power and then gather his strength to destroy it. Unfortunately, he didn't bid for your master. So he had no choice but to change his plan and forcibly seize the Yang volume. He did not expect to be ambushed by a third party in the process. So his death has nothing to do with my master. It's not completely unrelated. But this matter cannot be blamed on you. After all, it looks like King Tiankuan intends to digest this matter on his own. I came to this conclusion based on some of the clues and evidence I currently have. Madame Shan Xiu sighed and said, don't you find it strange that King Tiankuan didn't leave anything behind the moment he turned into ashes? It is indeed very strange. Zhang Zi nodded. A normal cultivator's death wouldn't have been so clean. King Tiankuan evaporated in an instant and disappeared without a trace. This method is very heaven-defying. Because the moment the third party got rid of him, they also took away all his storage magic treasures. From the very beginning, they were after the Yin volume of the Book of Nine Realms. After listening to the entire inference, everyone couldn't help but have mixed feelings in their hearts. Although Madame Shanxiu had only come to this conclusion based on the clues they currently had, with her status in the cultivation world, the credibility of her words was very high. This was a very reasonable conclusion, and also explained a lot of things that he hadn't been able to figure out before. So the question now was, who on earth was this third party? In fact, at that moment, he vaguely had the answer in his heart. Madam, since you've said so much, you should know a little about this third party, right? Zhang Zi asked solemnly at that moment. It's just a guess, I can't be sure. Madame Shanxiu shook her head slightly and said, this person's power is spread throughout the Central Territory and the 4 major territories. He's a new force that has flourished in the last 100 years, and has made a lot of money from the war between the Eastern and Western territories. He has a very solid foundation, could it be? Zhang Zi suddenly thought of something. Yes, this force's surname is Peng. The error-free chapters of the daily life of the immortal king will continue to be updated on the new C-Book Pavilion. There are no advertisements on the site, so please bookmark and recommend the new C-Book Pavilion. If you like the daily life of the immortal king, please bookmark. The daily life of the immortal king is updated the fastest in the C-Book Pavilion. Chapter 1881. It could be said that Madame Shanxiu's words explained a lot of things that he hadn't been able to understand before. For example, given Dao ancestor Wang's prestigious status in the cultivation world, why had he chosen a rebellious person like Peng Shiren as his disciple? After all, talent wasn't the only thing that mattered when it came to choosing a disciple, morality and character were equally important. Looking at it all now, Peng Shiren was nothing more than a usurper who claimed to be Dao ancestor Wang's disciple. Because of Wang Ling's promise, Dao ancestor Wang had no choice but to accept him and pass on his legacy to him. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Even East Great Emperor was surprised when he heard this. It wasn't that the 4 emperors hadn't paid attention to the Peng family, which had risen to prominence in the last 100 years, but they hadn't expected them to actually have such an idea. Seniors, I suddenly thought of a possibility, Lotus Sun suddenly said at that moment, her expression extremely solemn. Miss Sun, please speak. East Great Emperor nodded and looked like he was all ears. I'm thinking, what if King Tiankuan's death and Peng Shiren's subsequent fight for the Book of 9 Realms are actually part of the historical trajectory? It had to be said that Lotus Sun's very bold idea shocked everyone present and they looked at each other in dismay. East Great Emperor asked, are you saying that it's still part of the historical trajectory? Lotus Sun nodded obediently, then analyzed the situation unhurriedly. I think that the progress of the diary, including East Great Emperors, is actually the first time we've experienced it. Although it says what will happen later, it's true that things haven't developed according to what's written in the diary, and it seems like we've already deviated from the historical trajectory. But if all of this was planned by the senior who wrote the diary, that's a different story. Since that senior has the ability to write this diary that transcends timelines, then he definitely has the power to influence the development of the timeline. If he has already calculated King Tiankuan's death, then he will definitely be able to control the trajectory of events. If he has already calculated King Tiankuan's death and Peng Shiren's obtaining of the Book of 9 Realms, then everything else actually makes sense. As for what I said above, there's actually evidence to back it up. After all, Peng Shiren did indeed inherit Dao ancestor Wang's legacy in the modern cultivation society. This legacy is very pure, and clearly wasn't given to him by the Yin scroll of the Book of 9 Realms. Everyone was stunned by her words. Wang Zhen thought it over carefully and felt that there was some truth to her words. Actually, Rongrong's words are quite logical. Also, why do I feel that rather than saying that the person who was clearly arranged is the dead King Tiankuan, it's better to say that it's this Peng Shiren? Lu Qingyi quickly nodded in agreement with Wang Zhen's opinion. That makes sense. After all, in the timeline of the modern cultivation society, even if Peng Shiren inherited Dao ancestor Wang's orthodoxy, he would still be beaten up by senior Wang, wouldn't he? That is to say, this orthodoxy was probably inherited by him on purpose in our timeline. Wang Ling and Wang Ying, so that was how it was. At that moment, Wang Ling couldn't help thinking that Lotus Sun was a genius. He had only wanted to find the mastermind behind the mysterious text, but he had neglected this layer of logical connection. That was right, this Peng Shiren had already inherited his orthodoxy in the modern cultivation society. Even if he had inherited Dao ancestor Wang's orthodoxy, it wasn't as strong as Wang Ling had imagined. Orthodoxy was a good thing. It could greatly increase a cultivator's cultivation in a short period of time, which was the equivalent of a grandmaster giving a meal to eat. But orthodoxy also had its limits. Because if Peng Shiren had talent that surpassed Dao ancestor Wang's, inheriting Dao ancestor Wang's orthodoxy would instead be a shackle for him. And this point was actually proven right now. Because Peng Shiren wasn't interested in the orthodox Book of Nine Realms, he was instead more interested in the Yin Scroll replica. After all, the Yin Scroll contained the power of the old world, which could double his strength and give him infinite possibilities. After analyzing the situation at this point, it seemed that the current situation was already infinitely clear. Faced with a script that had completely deviated from the diary's trajectory, Wang Ling finally knew how to put a full stop to this plot from the eternal world. It looks like we still have to wait for the Four Emperors' assembly tomorrow. At that moment, Wang Ying looked around and said, "It's impossible that Great West Emperor doesn't know about King Tiankuan's death." Under normal circumstances, given the conflict between Great West Emperor and Great East Emperor, he would have already come looking for revenge. But Great West Emperor hasn't done anything yet. This can only mean one thing, and that is that Great West Emperor has also thought of this, which is why he hasn't made a move. In that case, the force that Peng Shiren belongs to will still make a move, said Yu Yuqing. She did her best to straighten her posture and control her snake body. Although moving was no different from walking on two legs in a normal situation, this abrupt feeling was still present. This Peng Shiren doesn't know that King Tiankuan has already transferred the Yin Scroll, and that it's in Madame Shanxiu's hands. So the most likely scenario now is that he'll directly snatch the Yang Scroll. Then, he'll use a magic treasure or secret art from the old world to replicate the Yin Scroll. Daoist Yu is absolutely right. At that moment, Wang Ying's eyes met Yu Yueqing's. This Daoist priest was young, but extremely quick-witted. On the other side, Zhang Zipei had also come over with the Yin Scroll that Madame Shanxiu had given him. Madame Shanxiu was a woman of her word. Not only did she explain the whole story, she also directly offered the Yin Scroll to Wang Ying. She wasn't stupid. In her hands, this thing was no different from an invisible time bomb. Furthermore, as an orthodox cultivator, she had no intention of opening it at all. No cultivator in their right mind would want the terrifying civilization of the old world to revive in the eternal cultivation world. That dark and twisted history should remain as history forever, sealed in the long river of time. What should we do? What should we do with this thing? Zhang Zipei took the initiative to hand over the Yin Scroll. Wang Ling accepted the Dao Yin Scroll, but he had no intention of opening it. Although he was curious about the old world, he was now well aware that he was making a decision on behalf of future cultivators. Thus, he didn't think too much about it. A dazzling black and white flame immediately rose in his hand, and with a bang, the Yin Scroll was directly burned to ashes. East Great Emperor's Adam's apple couldn't help bobbing up and down. He never thought that the Yin Scroll of the Book of Nine Realms would actually be burned so easily. What kind of method was this? In the last few days, the methods that this senior hiding in his body had repeatedly displayed had already surpassed East Great Emperor's own understanding. Especially when he had just heard people say that Peng Shiren, who had inherited Dao ancestor Wang's legacy, had been beaten up by this senior Wang in the modern cultivation world. East Great Emperor's heart was filled with mixed feelings. What kind of person was Dao ancestor Wang? This was the legend and pearl of the eternal cultivation world. This group of people actually didn't revere such a person at all. This was too scary. Even East Great Emperor himself began to have faint doubts. Was the first founder of cultivation Dao ancestor Wang or not? Chapter 1882. At the entrance of Spring Orchid Restaurant, Madame Shan Xiu left with Mei Yunhai, Sun Fu, Chen Ren, and Guo Jie. Sun Fu successfully received the recommendation letter from Mr. Room 1 to the East Emperor's Imperial Palace. She was very pleased. Originally, the East Emperor only promised to keep Sun Fu by his side temporarily. It was just a vague evasive move. He wanted to wait for the right time to reject Sun Fu. But now, Madame Shan Xiu had fulfilled her promise regarding the Book of Nine Realms. It could be said that she had made a great contribution. He felt that if he still did not agree to Sun Fu's request, it would be unreasonable. Therefore, he immediately asked Zhang Zi to draft a recommendation letter using Li Ren's notes and stamped it with the royal seal that was prepared in advance. He then sent the entire letter to Sun Fu. Sure enough, after receiving the recommendation letter, Sun Fu was overjoyed. Oh my God, this is the 9-star royal seal. This person is really a big shot. His status is noble. With this recommendation letter, there's 100% chance that you'll be able to cultivate in the East Region Imperial Palace. The few of them stared at the seal on the recommendation letter with their eyes wide open. The royal family was a noble member of any domain, but there were actually different ranks among the members of the royal family. Under normal circumstances, a royal family with a 9-star royal seal could only mean one thing. That was that this royal family had a direct bloodline connection with the emperor in the East Emperor Palace. Therefore, their status was far more noble than ordinary royal families. Thank you, madam. If it wasn't for you, I think this matter most likely wouldn't have happened. Sun Fu smiled brightly, like a dazzling summer flower. Sister Fu, do you really want to enter the East Emperor Palace? Is there something there that attracts you? Madam has the best relationship with the South Emperor Palace. If you entered the South Emperor Palace, Madam wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Guo Jie asked. I can only say that this is a kind of fate. I always feel that I am fated with the East Emperor Palace, and I seem to have met this Mr. Room 1 somewhere before. Sun Fu said. You will have a chance to meet again. Madame Shan Xiu smiled. We? Sun Fu was stunned. Yes, you guys. Madame Shan Xiu maintained her benevolent smile. She swept her gaze over Sun Fu, Chen Ren, and Guo Jie with a meaningful look in her eyes. On the other side, after sorting out his basic thoughts, Wang Ling already had a clear idea of what to do next. If he was right, Peng Shiren would definitely continue to make a move on the Yang scroll in his hands. In this situation, all he needed to do was wait for the heir to come to him, but he felt that he couldn't wait that long. He had to find Peng Shiren and then resolve this ill-fated relationship from ancient times. However, with the vastness of the eternal world and the number of galaxies, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find a person in the vast number of planets. He had no choice but to require the help of others. Fortunately, Wang Ling had already contacted quite a few partners. As long as everyone worked together, it wouldn't be difficult to find Peng Shiren no matter how vast the universe was. With the help of the other great emperors, it'll be easier to find this Peng Shiren if we combine the strength of the 4 emperors to lay an inescapable net, East Great Emperor said through the voice chat spell. But the 4 emperors' assembly hasn't started yet. How do we contact the other great emperors? Zhang Zi asked secretly. There was a way to contact the other great emperors, but it wasn't direct. They still needed to wait for their responses, and any delay might cause problems. Thus, East Great Emperor thought that it was best to have someone who could act as a medium to pass on information at this time. Furthermore, this person had to be very clear about the positions of the 4 great emperors. The first person East Great Emperor thought of in the eternal world was Lu Myukan, the president of the Central Auction House. Senior Wang, didn't you say before that Lu Renwen, the son of the president of the Central Auction House, is also one of you? East Great Emperor suddenly asked at that moment. That's right. He also transmigrated from modern cultivation society to the eternal world. Wang Ying nodded. If this senior can use his identity as the son of the president of the central auction house, Lu Renwen, to invite his father, Lu Myukan, out of retirement. This Lu Myukan should be a medium to pass on information about us four emperors, and he might have the means to find a place for us to meet before the four emperors' assembly, East Great Emperor said. He knows about you four emperors? Who on earth is he? Wang Ying was very curious. I heard that this Lu Myukan used to be Dao ancestor Wang's personal guard. No wonder he has this kind of ability. Wang Ying sighed. He felt that all this could be considered an arrangement. Fortunately, the person who had transmigrated into Lu Renwen's body was Qin Zong, so as long as Wang Ling sent a telepathic message to Qin Zong from afar to ask him to do this, it shouldn't be difficult to invite Lu Myukan out of retirement. In fact, Lu Myukan and Qin Zong arrived a little faster than he had imagined. He had only sent the message to Qin Zong less than a quarter of an hour ago. Two tightly wrapped black-robed figures appeared at the entrance of the Spring Orchid brothel. One of them was Qin Zong, who had transmigrated into Lu Renwen's body. Everyone was very surprised that this matter had been settled so quickly. Senior Qin settled it so quickly. Lotus Sun glanced at Qin Zong, who had taken off his hood, and then saw the person standing next to him also take off his hood. This was a middle-aged man with a well-proportioned build and a mustache. At first glance, Lotus Sun's impression of him was that he was naturally dignified and gave off a faint sense of dignity. This person was none other than Lu Myukan himself. Considering that Lu Myukan had previously been Dao ancestor Wang's personal guard, it wasn't too surprising that he had this kind of aura. But very quickly, Lotus Sun realized that this Lu Myukan was gradually losing his composure. He first looked at Lotus Sun and said, "Mistress." Lotus Sun immediately returned a startled look. You are," then, that dignified face started to twist, and the moment he saw East Great Emperor, he dropped to one knee on the ground on the spot and threw himself at Wang Ling with tears in his eyes. "Shifu, oh Shifu. Disciple missed you so much. What would disciple do without you?" Wang Ling, in fact, even Wang Ling himself never thought that Odd Zhuo would actually transmigrate into the body of Lu Myukan, the president of the central auction house. This world was really too small. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed endlessly in his heart. Chapter 1883. As Odd Zhuo threw a tantrum, Wang Ling couldn't help feeling a little absent-minded. In that instant, he suddenly felt that the world was really too small. Of course, all of this was an inexorable arrangement and coincidence, and it could also be said to be a kind of luck. Although he hadn't cast the Great Luck spell on himself, Qin Zong was the only koi he had chosen in the cultivation world. With this koi, their luck naturally wouldn't be too bad. Lu Myukan, the president of the central auction house, was the only person who controlled the intelligence network of the four territories. Throughout the ages, no one had been able to replace Lu Myukan as the perfect middleman. It was just that for Wang Ling, whether or not Odd Zhuo could play the role of Lu Myukan well was still a question. In short, the real Lu Myukan would never do something like cry for his parents and throw himself at anyone he saw. He was actually rubbing his head against Wang Ling's chest. What a scandal! Wang Ling calmly pushed Odd Zhuo's head away and sighed in his heart, feeling that Odd Zhuo didn't have the slightest sensitivity. If Ryoko Kamiya saw this, she would definitely be jealous. That's not right, how do you know this? Just then, Wang Ying suddenly asked Wang Ling telepathically. As Wang Ling's shadow, he and Wang Ling were telepathically connected, so he noticed a blind spot in Wang Ling's thoughts. Wang Ying found it inconceivable that an unromantic teenager who always had a poker face would actually know how to be jealous. Wang Ling felt that Wang Ying was making a mountain out of a molehill when he asked this question. Of course, he hadn't experienced the various emotions that a normal person should have, and naturally didn't know what jealousy felt like. But it wasn't that he didn't completely understand what jealousy meant. To be exact, Wang Ling knew the literal state of every emotion. In Wang Ling's dictionary, jealousy was categorized as a special possessiveness. For example, this was the reaction you would have when you saw something or someone you liked getting closer to someone else. In this regard, Wang Ling deliberately gave Wang Ying an example patiently. For example, when he sometimes saw other people eating limited edition crispy noodle snacks that he couldn't buy, he would often have this feeling. This is jealousy. This is definitely jealousy. Wang Ying dropped his forehead into his hand. He felt that Wang Ling's understanding of jealousy seemed to have a strange deviation, but obviously, this wasn't the time to discuss this. Right now, their biggest mission was to gather the 4 emperors and hold a secret meeting ahead of time. Then, they would set up a trap to lure Peng Shiren out. As the core of this plan, Odd Jewel would play a crucial role in the subsequent plot. Don't worry, Master. I have confidence in this matter. Elder, you don't need to move. I'll use Lu Mukin's method to call the other imperial capitals here in Chunlan building, Odd Jewel promised solemnly. Everyone knew that in the immemorial cultivation world, other than Dao ancestor Wang, the people with the highest status were the 4 emperors who controlled the 4 domains. Under normal circumstances, it was extremely difficult for a normal cultivator to meet the great emperor. As for making the 4 emperors instantly gather at a specific location, it was even more impossible in the eyes of ordinary people. However, Lu Mukin had this special charisma. Even Zhang Zizi was very curious. Even if Lu Mukin was once Dao ancestor Wang's guard, does he really have the face to invite other great emperors? There must be some other reason behind this. Do you have something on them to threaten them? Threaten? How is that possible? In any case, this Lu Mukin used to be Dao ancestor Wang's guard, how could he do such a despicable thing? Furthermore, the targets of this threat are the great emperors. Although this Lu Mukin is strong, it won't be easy to offend 4 great emperors at the same time, right? Odd Jewel said. After listening in, Zhang Zizi frowned and nodded. That's true. But now, everyone was even more curious as to what method Lu Mukin would use to call the other 3 great emperors here. In the end, Odd Jewel just took out a storage bag from Lu Mukin's body. Actually, he hadn't been idle in the past few days when he hadn't met up with Wang Ling. He had been studying his identity through the memories Lu Mukin had passed on to him, putting himself in the role and waiting for an opportunity to act. He knew that he would definitely meet up with Wang Ling, so he had already familiarized himself with everything early on. To everyone's surprise, the thing that Odd Jewel took out from Lu Mukin's personal storage bag was very simple. It was a crystal communication ball that couldn't be any more ordinary, and was a relatively advanced communication device in the immemorial cultivation world. Unlike ordinary communication talismans, not only could it hold more spirit energy imprints corresponding to different cultivators, it could also establish a huge network of contacts. The most important thing was that it could directly make a face-to-face video call, and project images into the air. You're so close that you can directly use a communication ball to summon someone. East Great Emperor was stupefied and shocked. Although he also had Lu Mukin's communication ball, as one of the 4 great emperors, he knew that summoning a great emperor-level figure to a designated location. Even if it was Lu Mukin, the process wouldn't be that convenient. But now, Lu Mukin had actually directly called to summon someone. Had his relationship with the other 3 great emperors already reached this level? At that moment, East Great Emperor started to feel a sense of crisis. Don't be nervous, it's not as outrageous as you think. Odd Jewel gave a mysterious smile. Then he used the communication crystal ball to directly contact West Great Emperor. Little Shi, you can come over now. That's right, that Chunlan house on the central trade planet, it's next to the temple. Little Shi. Everyone was startled by this familiar form of address. Was the person calling Little Shi really an emperor? And not an underling? Why did it feel like déjà vu of a mafia boss ordering his underling around? For all. East Great Emperor had a mental breakdown. He never expected the relationship between West Great Emperor and Lu Mukin to be this good. Directly calling him Little Shi was outrageous. But just as he was about to vomit blood, West Great Emperor's voice came through the communication crystal ball. Are you sure? King Tiankuan is dead, and I'm still dealing with the chaos here. The court officials have reported to me to directly send troops to attack the Eastern Territory, but I'm still playing Tai Chi with them. Don't pay attention to them. Find an excuse to get away and come directly here. My Shifu, Master's wife, Senior Zhang Zijin, Brother Wang Zhen, Miss Lu Qingyi, Daoist Yu Yueqing and Brother Qin Zong are all here, Zhuo said. After saying this, everyone finally understood and understood a little. Lotus Sun instantly understood, and an enlightened expression appeared on her face. Senior Zhuo, could it be that this great West Emperor is also, at that moment, Zhuo smiled. That's right. This West Great Emperor is actually Senior Li Xian. Brother Qin Zong and I didn't do anything else in the past few days in the Eternal World except make calls through this communication crystal ball. In the end, we didn't expect each call to be accurate. Hearing this, everyone was even more shocked. Lotus Sun, then the other two emperors, Master's wife, you're right. The other two emperors are also our people. North Emperor is Brother Xiang Yi, and the only female emperor, South Emperor, is Senior Golden Lamp. Senior Golden Lamp, don't worry, they're all very good at acting. After all, Senior Golden Lamp had the experience of being a woman in several reincarnations. He's more than enough to play an empress. That is to say, apart from Brother Gu Xuanji, we've found everyone else who has transmigrated to the Eternal World. No, there's still isn't with me. Oh, I see. Don't worry, Master's wife, I haven't finished calling my contacts yet. Later, I'll have Senior Qin Zong stand on the side and call a few more. Chapter 1884. Wang Ying also knew that Sun Yinger had disappeared. Although he didn't show it on the surface, he had already secretly activated Shadow Dao's sensing ability to sense her many times. But for some reason, after coming to this eternal world, the connection between him and Sun Yinger had been completely cut off, and there was no sign of any connection at all. Wang Ying was sure that this wasn't a problem with Shadow Dao. After all, the connection between him and Wang Ling was still there, which meant that Shadow Dao was operating normally. But why couldn't he sense Sun Yinger? Wang Ying felt that there might be some other reason behind this. Fortunately, the good news was that of the four emperors who currently controlled the Eternal World, East Emperor was jointly controlled by Wang Ling and Wang Ling, while the other three emperors were on his side. In addition, Zhuo was playing the role of Lu Mukan, who controlled the strongest intelligence network in the Eternal World. As long as they worked together, it wouldn't be difficult to find a specific person, even if it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. They just needed to use their respective forces to send out the appropriate signal across the universe. Of course, the most important prerequisite for this was that Sun Yinger had to respond to him. For example, Wang Ling had used a hint at the auction house earlier to get in touch with Qin Zong, Lu Qingyi, and Yu Yueqing. While waiting for the rest of his partners to arrive at Chunlan Building, Wang Ying clearly felt uneasy. President Ying, are you worried about Ying? Lotus Sun was happy to see this. She thought this would be a very good demonstration, especially for Wang Ling, and would be of great reference value. But while the demonstration was a classic, so was the tsundere. Wang Ying snorted and crossed his arms with East Emperor's body as he said coldly, who's worried about her? It wasn't easy for her to hide in this eternal world. Now that she doesn't have to be under my control, I'm afraid she can't wait to be happy. Although Wang Ying's tsundere wasn't as exaggerated as Ryoko Kamiya's, he had his own unique side. Lotus Sun thought that this might be the legendary contrasting cuteness. After all, Wang Ying indeed didn't have the word cute in him. President Ying, it's not good to lie. Don't you want to find Ying? It's best if I can't find her. Otherwise, I'll have to find her every night and make her back hurt. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but gasp. Those who didn't know the truth felt that this sentence seemed to contain a lot of information. The master hadn't even started yet, but the shadows were progressing at a godly speed. They were already so lovey-dovey. This. What a scandal. Perhaps CEO Ing is right. Without Ing around, you really don't have to worry. But apart from Ing, I'm afraid no one can withstand your planetary blockbuster spell, Lotus Sun said again. This time, she chose to retreat in order to advance. Wang Ying was as stubborn as ever, refusing to admit that he wanted to find Sun Yinger. Even if I, Wang Ying, am scolded to death, I will die outside. He would never think about anything related to this fellow. She's the master of the void. Why should I worry? What a joke. The short conversation between the two echoed in the space, and no one could interrupt. The rest of the people just watched silently. From beginning to end, Lotus Sun's gaze never stopped on the East Great Emperor, causing his hair to stand on end. But the person she really cared about wasn't East Great Emperor, but Wang Ling. She really wanted to know how much Wang Ling had comprehended from it. There's always a way. At that moment, Wang Zhen said weakly to comfort everyone, and I think that it doesn't matter even if we don't find her. As long as we finish this plot, it means that our mission is over. Once it's over, everyone who transmigrated from the modern era to eternity will be able to go back together, right? In theory, that's true, but there's always the what if, Odd Zhua said. Odd Zhua said, in short, it's naturally the best if we can find everyone. Brother Wang Zhen, don't worry too much. Don't worry, before the script is over, you definitely won't have a child. After all, you haven't been pregnant for long, and you haven't taken any elixirs to accelerate your pregnancy, so there shouldn't be any problems. Wang Zhen immediately blushed at Odd Zhua's words. Let me be clear, I'm not doing this for myself, I know, we all understand. Odd Zhua stretched out his hand and patted him on the shoulder. If it were me, I would also panic. So when it comes to this, we have to learn from Senior Golden Lamp. Why? Do you think Senior Golden Lamp never experienced childbirth when he chose to be a woman in his countless reincarnations? Following Odd Zhua's nonsense, the scene fell deathly silent. On the other side, Sun Yinger was also in despair. How could she not want to get in touch with the main force as soon as possible? But there was nothing Sun Yinger could do now. She screamed and roared in her heart thousands of times, hoping that someone here would discover her existence sooner. But what made Sun Yinger even more desperate was that she couldn't make a sound in her current state. Most importantly, the binding between them had failed, and Wang Ying couldn't use Shadow Dao to sense her existence. This idiot! How could such a cunning and quick-witted person like him not discover her existence? She had thought that after being tortured by Wang Ying's planet-drumming spell countless times, the two of them should have a very good rapport with each other. Who would have thought that it would actually fail at this critical moment? Sun Yinger's heart was filled with sorrow. Of course, after thinking about it carefully, she felt that she couldn't completely blame Wang Ying for not being able to discover her. After all, no one would have thought that she was so far away, yet right in front of their eyes, that was right. After coming to Immemorial, the character she had transmigrated into was the child in the belly of the Holy Stone Church's Holy Virgin, played by Wang Zhen. At first, Sun Yinger hadn't realized this, and thought that she had just been trapped by some array. But Lu Qingyi's slap on Wang Zhen after she saw him had directly jolted her awake, so at that moment, Sun Yinger's heart was on the verge of collapse. She was really too miserable. What a scam! Why did other people transmigrate into Immemorial and act as emperors? Goddess! A filthy rich second generation. At the very least, she was a maid at His Highness's side. She was just a baby who couldn't move a thing and had zero fighting strength. Sun Yinger realized that she really had a mental breakdown. The point was that she was really scared. If the plot was over and no one found her, would she return to the modern world with everyone? If she was unfortunately left alone in Immemorial, how would she go back? Chapter 1885. Perhaps even the boss of Chunlan Building himself didn't expect to receive such a big deal today, even though he had already gone out to enjoy himself after receiving the booking fee. East Great Emperor had directly given him enough money to rebuild Chunlan Building. Even if East Great Emperor demolished the place during the negotiations, the boss wouldn't complain at all. But Chunlan Building was essentially a place for male and female cultivators of the eternal world to have fun, and it was also the place where the most courtesans and grass bosses gathered in the entire Central Region's trading star system. And it was in this place of debauchery, filled with all kinds of dazzling illusions and extravagance, that a shocking secret meeting of the four emperors was about to take place, which was something that most cultivators throughout the ages would never have imagined. Because of the gathering of the four emperors, the other three emperors weren't far from the central trade star. Following Jua's signal to assemble, 3 cloaked men quickly arrived at Spring Orchid Building, wrapped tightly in cloaks. Wang Ling didn't even need to sense them to know that they were the remaining 3 emperors. Even if their figures were hidden extremely well by their cloaks, he could still sense that they were extraordinary from their imposing auras. In the communication crystal ball earlier, Jua had already hinted that they needed to help Wang Ling hide his identity, so when the 3 of them came up, they respectfully lined up in front of East Great Emperor. After putting on a good show, they respectfully and humbly bowed in unison. This humble monk is Jin Dang, Xiang Yi, Li Xian, greetings, Senior Wang. It had to be said that monk Jin Dang indeed looked very familiar with controlling this body of an empress. It didn't feel like a man at all, and instead embodied the charm of an empress to the fullest. The only thing that was out of place was that he still retained the habit of being a monk. As everyone knew, although monk Jin Dang had been a woman, he was overall still a decent monk. Reincarnation was nothing more than his daily work as a supreme Buddhist saint, and there was nothing to make a fuss about. It was just that East Great Emperor was now thinking about this name carefully, and it suddenly dawned on him. When he had heard Jua call out Golden Lamp's name before, he had felt that it sounded very familiar. Now that monk Golden Lamp used the term, "this poor monk," to introduce himself, East Great Emperor immediately came back to his senses. "So it's you. After so many years, I didn't expect to see East Great Emperor's charm again after such a long time. This humble monk is very lucky." Monk Jin Dang performed a Buddhist salute in the Empress's body and then sat down cross-legged. "Jin Dang, I didn't expect it to really be you. I thought it was just a coincidence." East Great Emperor was shocked. Who would have thought that this Jin Dang was actually the monk Jin Dang? Not only had this monk lived into the modern cultivation world. Not only that, Jin Great Emperor, but he was also one of the best. For a moment, the Great East Emperor had mixed feelings. Although Golden Lamp Monk's strength was not as heaven-defying as it was now, he was still one of the most talented players. He was once considered a strong competitor for the throne of the Great Emperor. With everyone assembled, Wang Ying scanned the area in front of him and nodded in satisfaction. He then began to convey Wang Ling's message on his behalf. "I believe that everyone is clear about what to do next. The situation is urgent. What we need to do now is to put this section of history back on the right track." "Understood." The other 3 emperors nodded at the same time. They were all old acquaintances in their bodies, so there was no problem communicating at all. Lastly, about the reward for the successful completion of this mission. At that moment, Wang Ying spoke. "In theory, most of the people here were now members of Battle Sect. Although Xiang Yi and Qin Zong were temporary guest officials and elders, they were in fact still part of the official establishment. Generally speaking, Battle Sect would assign a difficulty rating based on the mission, with the lowest being D, followed by C, B, A, S, SS, and the highest being SSS. Battle Sect would then organize teams based on the difficulty of the mission, and finally give a score of 10 points based on the completion of the mission as well as the performance of all the mission executors during the execution of the mission. During the mission, if the score was less than 6, it meant that you didn't have an outstanding overall performance, and you would only get a portion of the mission points, which would be accumulated and exchanged for corresponding items in Battle Sect's treasury. Scores above 6 were completely different. Furthermore, if the difficulty of the mission was high, the reward would also be very amazing. Wang Ling wasn't a stingy person, although he knew very well that as long as he said the word, everyone would do their best. But sometimes, a proper reward was still necessary. This is a temporary mission, and the difficulty of this mission is the highest since the founding of our sect, SSS. All core members of Battle Sect with a score of 6 and above can choose a magic treasure of their choice from the King's treasure pants, Wang Ying said straightforwardly as he conveyed Wang Ling's meaning. Everyone's eyes instantly lit up. Wang Ling didn't think much of the things in Wang Zhibao's pants, but for everyone here, every item inside was a treasure that people would scramble to get their hands on. Of course, it was usually grenade-throwing senior immortal and the elders of Battle's sect who would hold a meeting to discuss and decide how to grade disciples for sect missions. Occasionally, some sect disciples would deliberately curry favor with some elders to cover up their poor performance in missions, which would make things a little unfair. This was in fact a very serious violation of the rules, and if it was found out, there would be very severe punishments. If it was more severe, they might be directly expelled from Battle Sect. But with Wang Ling supervising the entire operation this time, there was absolutely no objection to this mission. Ling Zhenren personally grading the mission was absolutely fair and just. So the problem now was how they could set up a trap to lure Peng Shiren out. Given Peng Shiren's cautious character, if East Great Emperor didn't reveal any flaws, he definitely wouldn't try to snatch the Book of 9 Realms. But if he deliberately revealed a flaw, it would be too obvious, which would instead make Peng Shiren suspicious. At that moment, the 4 emperors had gathered together in a secret meeting, and all the networks and intelligence networks of the entire world were gathered here. Very quickly, Xiang Yi, who was playing the role of North Emperor, suddenly said, "That's right, there seems to be something like this in North Emperor's memories. I remember that the Peng family is looking for a son-in-law. And the person they're looking for is Peng Shiren's younger sister, Peng Basin, so I think it would be better." After thinking for a bit, Xiang Yi quickly stopped and shook his head. "No, forget it, I won't say it. This can only be considered a bad idea. You can say it first." "It's just a discussion, it's fine," Wang Ying said. Xiang Yi first looked at Lotus Sun, then said a little awkwardly, "What I mean is, since the original copy of the Book of 9 Realms is with Senior Wang, why don't we have him bring the original copy to propose marriage?" Hearing this, everyone was startled at first, and then many of them nodded their heads one after another. "Not bad, this idea doesn't seem too bad," said Li Xian, who was the West Great Emperor. This, how can we do that?" But at that moment, Lotus Sun suddenly stood up agitatedly, her face red. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." His anxious look made everyone around him smile knowingly. Looking at Lotus Sun's expression, the corners of Zhu's mouth rose wildly, and he simply couldn't stop himself. "Then, mistress, what do you want to do?" Quick-witted, Lotus Sun patted her chest and said, "How about this? Give me the Book of 9 Realms. I'll dress up as a man and propose marriage." The error-free chapters of the daily life of the Immortal King will continue to be updated in the popular bar. Everyone, please bookmark and recommend the popular bar. Those who like the daily life of the Immortal King, please bookmark. The daily life of the Immortal King's popular bar is the fastest to update. Chapter 1886. Under everyone's meaningful gazes, Lotus Sun's face grew redder and redder. To be honest, even she hadn't expected to come up with such a bold and constructive suggestion. In short, anyone could go and propose. East Great Emperor wasn't allowed to go. Even if East Great Emperor was using his own body, he still had Wang Ling and Wang Ying in it. Lotus Sun felt that this was a little strange. She thought that her actions could be regarded as righteous, and not just for her own selfish reasons, but also for Sun Yinger's sake. These two shadows had been lovey-dovey for so long, and were about to succeed. How could she ruin the critical juncture with something like this? That's right. Her suggestion now was generally for the sake of Sun Yinger and Wang Ying's happiness. It had nothing to do with her at all. No. Why do I get the feeling that you're a little anxious? Nonsense. Of course not. Lotus Sun's face grew hotter, and she looked around at the crowd. Am I anxious? Am I anxious? Do I look like I'm anxious? Lu Qingyi patted her on the shoulder and sighed. Don't say it, good disciple, it seems like you are a little. Yu Yueqing also nodded. A little anxious. Seeing everyone's meaningful gazes, Lotus Sun took several deep breaths and tried to regain her composure. Fine, even if I'm a little anxious, this is also for the sake of history returning to the right path. This is for the greater good of all cultivators, it's very normal. As expected of Master's wife, we admire her for being able to uphold the greater good of cultivators in this situation. Hearing this, the corners of Audju's mouth curled up slightly. He couldn't bear to continue leading the crowd in teasing Lotus Sunday. In any case, everyone present was well aware of what her anxious action meant. The only one who didn't understand the situation was that expressionless man hiding in East Great Emperor's body. After all, the Book of Nine Realms was a hot potato in the current situation. Even if it was in East Great Emperor's hands, it might not be safe, let alone in Lotus Sun's hands. But on second thought, he felt that it might be easier to leave this matter to Lotus Sunday. In any case, the course of history was already a mess, it wouldn't matter even if Lotus Sun summoned the mysterious sea. If they really ran into an emergency, with the mysterious sea's protective sword body, Wang Ling didn't think that the Peng family would be a match for the Nine Corps' mysterious sea. Of course, the more important reason was that he thought girls would understand girls better, so it would be very abrupt for a few men to suddenly propose marriage. Lotus Sun's thoughts were a little more meticulous, which might make the whole thing seem even smoother. After deciding on the plan, Lotus Sun heaved a long sigh of relief. Lu Qingyi and Yu Yueqing helped to give Lotus Sun an exquisite makeover, mainly focusing on her skin tone and facial features, so that her originally delicate face now had a more masculine contour. He didn't make too many changes to his hairstyle. He just adjusted the length of his hair so that it fell down naturally. Then, he added some bangs on both sides of his forehead, instantly making him look like a handsome and elegant man. When everyone saw Lotus Sun come out of the room in a pure white man's suit, they couldn't take their eyes off her. Her foundation was excellent to begin with, and even though she had been dressed as a man, she was still stunning. Even East Great Emperor was flabbergasted. Whether it was a man or a woman, such a face could be called an immortal. Even if the four great emperors' imperial palaces were full of handsome men and beautiful women, they wouldn't be able to find anyone who couldn't take their eyes off her at first glance. In fact, cross-dressing was the best way to tell whether a person was good or bad. It was true that beauty was in the bones, not the skin. It's feasible. I think it's totally feasible. Bring the Book of Nine Realms and the betrothal gift to propose marriage. I guarantee that Peng Basin will like you at first glance. For some reason, Audjue suddenly felt a little excited. After everyone came up with a plan for the marriage proposal, the core members of Battle Sect, who were playing the roles of the four great emperors, as well as Lu Muken's Audjue, quickly set up an inescapable net to prepare for the subsequent marriage proposal. Although it was just an act, it was in fact fishing. Since they were going to catch a fish, they naturally had to make all the necessary preparations. The marriage proposal team had to be luxurious and couldn't be lower than the standard of a 9-star imperial family in the eternal cultivation world. Furthermore, the team had to be densely packed with experts, and the lowest realm standard had to be Tao God level. The Sea Calming Pearl, Sky Jade, 8 Desolation Ruler, 9-Faced Lion Heart, a dazzling array of magic treasures and natural treasures formed a long list that stretched as far as the eye could see. This was a list of treasures from the four great emperor palaces. Every item was so precious that it was enough to drive the cultivators of the eternal world crazy. But now, these things were going to be the betrothal gift to the Peng family, which made people sigh. The East Great Emperor sweated when he saw this. Isn't this a little overprepared? It's just for show. There's no need for East Emperor to worry. Xiang Yi laughed. In any case, these things aren't ours, so don't worry too much. East Emperor was speechless. What Zhuo said made so much sense that he was speechless for a moment. Next, they headed straight for the Peng family's headquarters. If it wasn't for the four emperors' secret meeting this time, perhaps no one would have known that the Peng family's forces had already spread across the four major territories, and that the reason why the Peng family had set up their headquarters in the central territory was because it was convenient for trade. On the other hand, it was also because they could control the forces of the four territories through this central location, which made it easier for them to distribute the Peng family's spies among the major territories. Although the four emperors had sent intelligence personnel to investigate the Peng family before, the information obtained was limited. The universe was so big that the detection of intelligence could not be too obvious, not to mention that this information was not made public. Even though the East Emperor had already judged that the Peng family's power network over the years had probably expanded to an unimaginable level before this secret meeting, when they marked the distribution of the Peng family's major forces as asterisks on the same map, they couldn't help but be shocked. The East Emperor was shocked when he saw the stars all over the map. It seems that the Peng family's ambition is not small. I'm afraid they also have sympathy for the throne, Wang Ying said. East Emperor was also worried about this. The Peng family is too scary. They colluded with the old world. We must not let them seize the general trend. I don't know if we can take this opportunity to suppress them. Wang Ying nodded. Of course. Originally, weakening the Peng family's power was also within our scope, wasn't it? Chapter 1887. Although it was she who had volunteered to dress up as a man to propose marriage, she still couldn't help feeling a little hesitant and nervous when it really came time to do it. After all, a lot of boys didn't have any experience with marriage proposals, let alone a girl like her. And for some reason, she felt that it was a little weird to do it. Her original intention had been to stop Wang Ling from proposing. No, her original intention had been to keep Sun Yinger and Wang Ying together for the sake of righteousness. But it wasn't Wang Ling who had proposed, but she was the one who was going to get married in the end. She had dug a hole for herself. After realizing this, Lotus Sun even felt a little remorseful, and felt that she had been too rash in the end. Also, this was a serious matter, because the success or failure of the marriage proposal would directly affect the course of human cultivators' history. If anything went wrong, she would be a sinner in history. This heavy pressure made it hard for her to breathe, and she kept taking deep breaths on the way to the Peng family's main residence. Lu Qingyi and Yu Yueqing disguised themselves as maids and stayed by her side. Since King Tiankun wasn't around, they didn't have to force themselves to stay in their snake forms, and directly grew legs to look no different from ordinary people. Why are you getting nervous so close to the end? Lu Qingyi asked with a smile as she comforted her. You don't have to feel too heavy of a burden, it's just an act. Lotus Sun understood that, but it was normal for people to reflect on themselves, and the more outstanding they were, the more it was so. She was so nervous that the muscles in her stomach ached, and she was full of regret. If she had obediently listened to Wang Ling and not intervened in this matter, things might not have come to this. Now that the turning point in history had been handed to her, if she messed it up again, she was really worried that her friendship with Wang Ling would plummet to an all-time low. It hadn't been easy for her and Wang Ling to come into contact with each other at this level. At that moment, Lotus Sun's thoughts were all over the place. As her imagination ran wild, she never thought that the person who would comfort her at that moment would actually be Yu Yueqing, whom she had always been on high alert against. You don't think too much at a time like this. Do you think it's your fault that things have become complicated? All of this was planned, including the fact that you gathered so many people to decipher the mysterious text and accidentally fell into this eternal world. It was all planned. Yu Yueqing looked calmly at Lotus Sun and said, "We're actually just pawns used by these seniors in the game." Since he was a chess piece, he just had to follow the plan step by step. Besides, Why did Ling Ling agree to let you go? Haven't you considered it at all? Hearing this, Lotus Sun abruptly raised her head, the expression on her face somewhat frozen. Yes, such an important mission was not child's play. Why had Wang Ling so readily agreed to let her do it? At this time, with Yu Yueqing's reminder, Lotus Sun vaguely began to understand. Ling Ling trusts you, that's why he gave you such an important task, Yu Yueqing said to Lotus Sun with a serious expression. At the same time, when she saw Lotus Sun's astonished expression, she couldn't help but feel amused. What? You looked at me in such a shocked manner, thinking that I would go out of my way to comfort you. Is it unbelievable? No. Taoist master, you misunderstood, you're being insincere again. Yu Yueqing laughed and swung her legs in a very relaxed and contented manner. Actually, I already have someone I like. I know. Lotus Sun lowered her head. It's classmate Wang Ling, right? No. Yu Yueqing shook her head like a rattle. This time, both Lotus Sun and Lu Qingyi were astonished. Those birthday presents you showed off earlier were indeed from Wang Ling, but I just wanted to tease you. Yu Yueqing was very straightforward and directly laid her cards on the table. Oh, there was a time when I was a kid when I really liked Ling Ling, but it wasn't until I became a Taoist and grew up that I realized that kind of feeling. It's probably just a sibling relationship, I think it's better for him to be my older brother. Then the person Taoist master you likes? Lu Qingyi suddenly asked. Perhaps realizing that she was being too nosy, she quickly waved her hand. It's fine, Taoist master you. It's fine even if you don't tell me, I'm just curious. Yu Yueqing blinked, her eyes sparkling beautifully. When the time comes, I'll naturally tell you. But Ling Ling isn't bad. If I'm rejected in the end, maybe I can use him as a spare tire. Lotus Sun and Yu Yueqing, spare tire. Yu Yueqing's eyes curved into crescents as she laughed again. You guys can't handle this. AI, how boring. This rather sincere exchange did indeed ease the tension in Lotus Sun's heart a lot. She had a vague feeling that Yu Yueqing's identity wasn't as simple as it seemed. At least for now, in Lotus Sun's eyes, Yu Yueqing really was very mysterious. The Peng family's headquarters was set up on Penglai planet in the central region of the galaxy. This was a dangerous place surrounded by many celestial bodies that contained powerful cosmic energy, and cultivators who passed by were swept up in them from time to time. The Peng family's headquarters here could be said to be like a fortress, easy to defend and difficult to attack. To the outside world, Penglai planet belonged to everyone, but almost all the businesses on it were related to the Peng family. This was an empire that belonged solely to the Peng family. The Peng family's headquarters on Penglai planet was a golden palace with richly carved beams and painted rafters. There were even quite a few carvings of creatures that didn't belong to the ancient cultivation world. These were the carvings of ancient creatures from the ancient world, which the Peng family had grandly carved into the walls as murals. It was clear that the Peng family's arrogance had reached a shocking level. At the border of Penglai planet, as Lotus Sun and the others' carriages passed by, a group of ancient city guards quickly surrounded them on disc-shaped magic artifacts. These neutral guards, who had originally been brought together by the four great emperors of the four regions to maintain the stability of the central region galaxy, had now become the targets of the Peng family's instigation. East Great Emperor was very dissatisfied with this. Holding his breath, he looked at the group of Penglai planet's ancient city guards and asked them in a very arrogant manner, "Who are you? What are you doing here? Do you know what kind of place Penglai planet is? I remember that the central region galaxy isn't under the jurisdiction of any power." East Great Emperor said indifferently as he stared at the ancient city guards in front of him, his expression fearless. "Today, I brought my family's young master to Penglai planet to propose marriage." "Propose marriage?" One of the ancient city guards smiled, extremely curious. "Everyone here is from the Peng family. Who can you go to propose marriage to? I remember that this isn't something a guard like you should be asking." East Great Emperor did his best to restrain his temper. "If you don't tell us why you're here, we won't let you pass." The guard crossed his arms and laughed wildly. But very quickly, his smile froze in the next second. Chapter 1888. Relying on their status on Penglai, the Peng family was so powerful that even the ancient city guards had been assimilated. They were fierce, chivalrous, and extremely arrogant. It could be seen from their attitude toward outsiders that the carriage Wang Ling and the others were in had a clear 9-star imperial family symbol, symbolizing that the people in the carriage were direct descendants of some great emperor. Even so, this group of assimilated ancient city guards didn't take them seriously. They were completely unreasonable and looked down on this group of great emperors. Such an arrogant attitude undoubtedly made the Great East sovereign very angry. He instinctively wanted to slap this guard in the face. But just as he raised his hand, Wang Ying forcibly controlled his body and held him down. "Just use your aura to intimidate them. If you slap them, this guard will die. It won't be good for our subsequent plans." As soon as he finished speaking, his aura was transmitted at the same time. Wang Ying had only released a little spiritual pressure, but the expressions of this group of ancient city guards instantly changed dramatically, and they could no longer laugh. As if they had been petrified, they stood where they were and didn't dare move at all. "They're done. Their realm will stop here for the rest of their lives, and they won't advance any further," Monk Jin Deng said at that moment, having seen some clues. This wasn't just an ordinary aura deterrence. At the same time, some nomological curses had been added to make these arrogant ancient city guards receive the most terrifying punishment as a cultivator. To them, this was a punishment that was far more miserable than death. Even so, East Great Emperor was still depressed. "These people eat the public grain of our 4 territories, but they betray their master for glory. They really can't be punished." It was hard to imagine that East Great Emperor, who had always been gentle and kind among the 4 emperors, could be so furious. If the other emperors hadn't been possessed by outsiders, it was likely that these ancient city guards would have died as well. As if expecting this reaction from East Great Emperor, Wang Ying said indifferently, "The environment can change people. Vanity, privilege, and everything that can tarnish the human heart may make these people think that they are superior to others, and thus completely forget that they are just dust in this world." Everyone sank into deep thought at Wang Ying's words, and even Wang Ling was a little surprised. He had never thought that his own shadow could actually think so deeply. Sometimes, he would think about what the essence of cultivation was, and occasionally weave a few golden sentences in his mind. However, he had never shared these words with anyone else. This was because he realized that there were too few people who could truly understand him, or rather, they simply didn't exist. The loneliness of being at the top could only be described as, "It's too cold at the top." The East Great Emperor tried hard to calm himself down. In the end, he listened to Wang Ying's words obediently and did not kill these ancient city guards in front of him. Of course, although Wang Ying's curse was real, it didn't give the ancient city guards a chance. If they can come to their senses in this life and rein in the horse before the precipice, this curse will naturally be lifted. Unfortunately, they've already sunk too deep. Wang Ying sighed. What on earth did the Peng family instill in them? Lu Qingyi looked at these petrified ancient city guards and felt it was a great pity. They had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, and had originally been chosen to guard an ancient city in a central region. If they could wait until the handover and return to their respective armies, they would definitely have boundless prospects in the future. But who would have thought that these people would choose to court death on this day? It could only be said that this was a kind of destiny. A number of carriages bearing the mark of the 9-star imperial family finally landed outside Penglai City. The spirit light from the Peng family's bejeweled main residence reached the sky even through the city walls. Looking down from the sky, this golden residence had been shocking, and now that they saw it face to face, they felt the Peng family's domineering nature even more. Wang Ling and the others wanted to park the carriages directly in front of the Peng family's main residence, but they couldn't stop on such a wide street. It was only when they approached Penglai city that they noticed the luxurious carriages and all kinds of divine beasts lined up in an orderly manner in front of the Peng family's main residence. What's going on? There's a traffic jam in the eternal world. In the Pegasus carriage, Lotus Sun frowned. I'll go and ask. Zhang Zide immediately got out of the carriage and used the spirit stones he had prepared as a tip. He casually grabbed a passing rogue cultivator and asked him. After receiving a large sum of money for the inquiry, the rogue cultivator's unhappy expression at being stopped instantly smoothed out. It's like this, these carriages are all here to propose marriage. I don't think, you're also here to propose marriage, are you? So many, to propose marriage? Everyone was astonished. This was the information they had received after integrating the intelligence network of the 4 emperors, and was probably first-hand information. But no one would have thought that the marriage proposals had actually already begun. Furthermore, there was a long line in front of the Peng family's main residence. Zhang Zide instantly understood. The only possibility was that the Peng family had spread the news locally and started to openly recruit people. But this made things completely different. No matter how big the local families on Penglai were, they couldn't be as big as the Peng family, so the son-in-law they found definitely couldn't compare to the Peng family in terms of family background. At most, he would be a live-in son-in-law. Furthermore, he wouldn't be the Dragon King's live-in son-in-law. This astonished everyone on Wang Ling's side. This Peng Basin was the daughter of the Peng family, why would she find a live-in son-in-law who didn't match their family background? How anxious was she to get herself married off? Miss Peng is a very eccentric person, and this marriage proposal was her idea to begin with. Lord Peng especially dotes on her, so Miss Peng practically handles everything herself. This passerby rogue cultivator looked like he was watching a melon. If Miss Peng takes a fancy to anyone, whether it's an official marriage or a live-in son-in-law, it's a supreme honor. Once you're on the Peng family's big boat, you definitely won't lack cultivation resources in the future. What else do you know? Zhang Zide asked as he gave him another bag of spirit stones. The passerby rogue cultivator nodded with a satisfied expression. I advise you to leave. This Miss Peng is a very lustful person. Although it'll be very touching to be on the Peng family's boat, she might overdraw her kidneys. Overdraw her kidneys? Lustful? Why do you think so? Because I heard that Miss Peng isn't just going to marry a live-in son-in-law today, this long line is to recruit a harem for herself. How many have you chosen so far? Not yet, because the requirements are too high. The passerby rogue cultivator sighed. Ha ha ha, I was just watching the fun. There was a guy called Kushuan who was rejected by Miss Peng. She said that his kidneys weren't good. Chapter 1889. As it turned out, it wasn't as easy to maintain order nowadays as the internet made it out to be. Even choosing a son-in-law had to be done according to the basic rules. The eldest daughter of the Peng family was a pearl in the palm of the Peng family's hand. Although grandfather Peng had given the right to choose his future son-in-law to eldest Miss Peng, he had certainly given her the lowest standards. According to that itinerant cultivator, the old man had formulated very strict regulations on the virtues of a son-in-law. Take the initiative to inform your wife or family members of any cultivation activities or cultivation gatherings, and apply no later than sunset. Under no circumstances are you allowed to drink or indulge in alcohol. If you meet someone who urges you to drink, you must immediately stay away from them, break off relations with them, and never associate with them again. If necessary, you can directly draw your sword and kill them. In public, under no circumstances are you allowed to eat anything that smells too strong or to smoke. You must remain quiet and constantly remind yourself that you are a quiet and handsome man. You must not wear revealing clothes. You can't wear a vest or sleeveless shirt, or wear shorts that go above your knees, and you can't go bare-chested. At the same time, you should always pay attention to your personal appearance at home. You must walk properly. When you walk, Your back must be straight and your gaze forward, and your eyes must be firm and aboveboard. You mustn't sneak a peek at other women, and you must maintain a kind of awe-inspiring righteousness at all times. Your steps must be just right, and can't be outward or inward. Before you are officially married, you are absolutely not allowed to have sex before marriage. Furthermore, you are not allowed to be alone with the opposite sex or spend the night outside, not even if it's necessary for business. Because business in the cultivation world requires dual cultivation. You must report to your wife in advance before you buy anything worth more than 500 mixed spirit stones. If you don't have money, you can ask your wife, and she will provide you with a loan depending on the situation. The annualized rate depends on the situation, and can range from 8% to 999%. If the person is good-looking and meets all the other requirements, you can ignore all the above male virtues regulations. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help sucking in breaths of cold air and sighing heavily. No one thought that this eldest Miss Peng's father would actually be so honest. Good heavens, it's too hard to ask for direct conditions. I can't do it even if I'm so well behaved. As someone who already had a partner, Wang Zhen felt very sad about this. He even felt that this journey of eternity was already a very bad example for Lu Qingyi. What if Lu Qingyi imitated these men's ethics rules after he went back and made a new version of modern cultivation men's ethics rules for him? He really wouldn't be able to live on then. Seeing Wang Zhen's fearful expression, Lu Qingyi was very satisfied. Given her outstanding training skills, even if she didn't use these rules to restrain Wang Zhen, he would definitely be a good man who abided by male ethics. The most important reason was that Wang Zhen was timid. To put it bluntly, he didn't have the courage to challenge his wife's bottom line. The most, he was that out that out that out that out that out that out to him out to him, and out to out to. This out that, this to. After standing there in a daze for a long while, he hurriedly drove his spirit sword away. This was too frightening. Even with his experience, he had never seen two women so intimate in the eternal world. Thus, this itinerant cultivator left as if he was fleeing. In the process, he seemed to think of something embarrassing, and he couldn't help blushing. These were two women. It turned out that two women could do it. He felt that he was too inexperienced. In contrast, he felt that his friend, who had trained his little female cat to cultivate into a beautiful human girl and then married him, was a lot more normal. As if they could hear this cultivator's thoughts, the corners of Wang Ling's and Wang Ying's mouths twitched at the same time. Marrying a female cat that he had trained into a beautiful human girl, this was obviously even more outrageous. At that moment, Wang Ling's heart was crumbling. Looking at the long queue in front of him, he couldn't help feeling a deep sense of despair. At this rate, the sun would be setting by the time they arrived. Furthermore, it seemed that the Peng family's headquarters had come up with a limit on numbers, which was to say that they might not even get a chance to propose today. Fortunately, because of Zhang Zipei, East Great Emperor now had a lot of funds at his disposal. As long as he had enough money, he could buy the number of the person in front of him. Brother, our master is in a hurry. I wonder if you can be magnanimous. Zhang Zipei asked on his behalf with a smile on his face. The person in front of them was also a noble young master. He looked elegant and seemed to be easy to talk to. However, in the eyes of the Peng family's headquarters, he was nothing more than a live-in son-in-law. Who are you? You want to cut the line? I won't cut the line for free, I'll pay you. As long as you let us swap places, we're willing to pay you 500,000 chaos spirit stones as a token of our gratitude, Zhang Zipei said, holding out a palm. The person in the carriage seemed to have heard Zhang Zipei's voice, and after hesitating for a moment, he decided to swap places. After all, whether or not he could become a live-in son-in-law was still a question, but 500,000 chaos spirit stones was real money. After swapping places with satisfaction, the elegant young master in the carriage smiled at Wang Ling's carriage. Brother, let me give you a piece of advice, money is useless. If this Miss Peng doesn't like you, you'll become a live-in son-in-law at most. How many people have been rejected before you? I think Miss Peng's standards are too high, and normal people won't like her. Then why did you come to line up? Zhang Zipei snickered. The young master smiled. Just think of it as a lottery ticket. What if I win? That's endless glory and wealth. This Peng family's headquarters has quite a background now. Everyone says that old Master Peng will be the future fifth emperor. As soon as he said this, the elegant young master's expression changed dramatically as he suddenly felt a huge chill coming from the carriage in front of him. It was the pressure of East Great Emperor, which immediately scared the elegant young master into silence, and he didn't dare speak at all. Just like that, Zhang Zipei spent money to buy places, and soon led Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, and the others to the main gate of the Peng family's headquarters. A steward of the Peng family's headquarters stepped forward. He was dressed in luxurious silk clothes, and even the patterns on them were embroidered with gold. When he saw Wang Ling and Lotus Sun's convoy, he didn't care about the 9-star imperial family emblem at all, and asked in a lazy and arrogant tone, "Who are you? Tell me your name." Chapter 1890. Wang Ling could see that the pattern on this steward's body wasn't from the eternal world, but was clearly the mark of the old world. At the bottom of the pattern was a surging wave woven from golden immortals and blue silk threads. Several tentacles from the old world poked out of the surface of the sea in a strange, beautiful arc. Wang Ling was all too familiar with these tentacles from the old world, because not long ago, he had hunted down a few tentacle-like creatures from Dopey from the old world for newborn Wang Nuan to satisfy her hunger. Such unbridled behavior was enough to show how overbearing and rampant the Peng family was on Penglai. There was only a bit of time left before the sun completely set. Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, and the others had bribed everyone along the way to make it to the last round of interviews for the day. Looking at the time, a lot of people knew that they were the last group of people for the day. But the people behind them didn't immediately disperse, even though they knew that they wouldn't be able to make it today. The young talents who had come to propose got out of their cars one after another, intending to join in on the fun. After all, the last person to be interviewed was a nouveau riche who had bribed his way to the front with money. A lot of people wanted to see the Peng family pour cold water on this nouveau riche. There was a huge gap between the rich and the poor in the eternal world, but there were still plenty of rich people. Given the Peng family's status on Penglai, ordinary nouveau riche definitely wouldn't be interested in them. So when Wang Ling and the others arrived, this steward's expression didn't look good. He had been observing Wang Ling and the others' motorcade for a long time. They had actually bribed their way here with money. Just as the housekeeper of the Peng family revealed a look of disdain, Zhang Zibai took a step forward and took out a jade box from his sleeve. He pretended to respectfully open the jade box and handed it to the housekeeper with both hands. "Hello, housekeeper. My young master is here to propose marriage in hopes that housekeeper can lead the way. This is a small token of my appreciation, I hope you won't mind." Ha! The steward's disdain didn't diminish, and he smiled contemptuously. Ha! Did they think his Peng family was a vegetarian? He hated this kind of nouveau riche the most. He was the dignified steward of the Peng family, and he was a somewhat famous figure on Penglai who didn't care how many rich people there were. A mere extraterrestrial nouveau riche actually dared to stand in front of him. Wait. This was, at first, he did not look carefully at the contents of the box. After a glance, he realized that it was an elixir, and it was no ordinary elixir. When the elixir in the jade box emitted a dazzling luster, the Peng clan's general manager's hand speed was extremely fast. He immediately closed the lid of the jade box. This alertness was actually because he didn't want the treasures and pills in the box to be seen by other busybodies. As the steward of the Peng family, his eyes were extremely sharp. He clearly knew that this was an ancestral Dao pill. This was a rare medicinal pill for breaking through to the Tao Father realm. Only great emperors could refine it. In reality, among the people who came to propose today, there were indeed many who came in the name of the 3-star, 6-star, or 9-star imperial family. However, it was the first time that the Peng family's chief steward had seen someone who used the Tao ancestor pill as a stepping stone. Although he didn't like this nouveau riche in front of him, he couldn't help feeling a little hesitant in the face of this Tao ancestor pill. For him, this kind of greeting gift was like giving him a pillow when he was sleepy. He had been stuck at the Tao God realm for a long time, and was just a step away from breaking through to Tao ancestor. However, he had always lacked comprehension. If he didn't break through with external help, he was afraid that his realm would stop here for the rest of his life. In the next moment, his expression softened a little as he personally accepted the jade box and stepped aside. "Young master, you're too polite. I will kindly accept this gift. Please come in, young master, but there are still a few more tests. If you can pass all of them, you can officially marry my family's young lady. If you can't, young master, you can consider becoming a son-in-law or directly leave." Understood. Inside the carriage, Lotus Sun took a deep breath and stepped out of the exclusive royal carriage of the 9-star imperial family under everyone's gazes. To tell the truth, she didn't feel any stage fright. Before she had fallen in love with Wang Ling and learned to keep a low profile, she had once enjoyed being the center of attention. But now, it could only be said that she had returned to her old profession. As the future young master of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, she had an innate ability to control the overall situation and confidence. This kind of bearing couldn't be considered ordinary. Coupled with the exquisite makeup that Lu Qingyi and Yu Yuqing had put on Lotus Sun, her immortal aptitude was already enough to stun everyone present. Which territory is this imperial family from? How come I've never seen this person before? Look at the patterns on his body, which combine the styles of the 4 territories. He definitely has an extraordinary background. Maybe he's favored by all 4 emperors at the same time. My God, there's someone like this in the world. The busybodies on the street who had joined in on the fun immediately started talking among themselves. To be honest, when he saw Lotus Sun in person, even the director of the Peng family was stunned for a moment. He believed himself to be very knowledgeable and knew almost all the famous families in the 4 regions, but he didn't remember such a person at all. To have the patterns of the 4 territories directly tattooed on the same robe, this alone was enough to prove that this person's identity was no small matter. "Before young master enters, please tell me who you are." "My name is Wang Rongxia," Lotus Sun answered without hesitation. Her identity was completely fake, and had been created by the core members of the battle sect who had impersonated the 4 emperors, so everything about this fake identity had been done flawlessly. Lotus Sun had already thought of a fake name. This was made up of the name of the character she had impersonated, Xia Xinyan, the homonym of her own name, and the surname of the person she liked. Wang Rongxia. The director of the Peng family carefully chewed on this name and began to do a carpet search in his mind, but it was as if he had lost his memory and couldn't remember anything. No matter how much he rummaged through the memories of those prestigious families, he couldn't find such a person. Of course, he also began to suspect that Lotus Sun was a fake identity. But even if it was a fake identity, the price to pay was a little too high. A Tao ancestor pill as a stepping stone, what kind of wealth was this? It didn't seem fake at all, thus, the steward of the Peng family finally didn't stop her, and welcomed her in. "So it's young master Wang Rongxia. Please come in, young master." In any case, there were still a few more tests, and he didn't think Lotus Sun would be able to pass them. The person in charge of the first test was a middle-aged man who looked like a scholar. He sat in front of a table and propped up his chin with his fingers crossed as he looked at Lotus Sunday. Sweeping a glance at the chair in front of the table, he smiled meaningfully. "Young master, please take a seat. If you want to marry my family's young miss, the first test is a discussion of Tao." "Okay." Lotus Sun nodded. Back in the carriage, East Great Emperor had already guessed this part. The middle-aged man nodded, then began to ask, "There are countless paths of cultivation. May I ask, young master, how should you find your own path? Lotus Sun thought for a moment, then answered, there are no paths in this world, but when there are people, there are paths. As soon as she said this, the whole audience burst into thunderous applause. The middle-aged man was clearly stunned when he heard this. Good answer, young master. Then may I ask, if someone is unable to break through after a long time and can't feel any hope, what would you think? Hope is attached to existence. With existence, there is hope, and with hope, there is light. Good, easy to understand, the middle-aged man was already completely stupefied. He scratched his head, then continued to ask, may I ask, young master, how do you understand life and death?